Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Spears comes into the backfield. Quick throw. Spears right side looks for a block. Turns the corner to the 25 on his feet. 20, 15, 10, 5. Touchdown! Titan.
Far to throw. Does throw towards the end zone to the back shoulder on the far side. And that is a touchdown. A.T. Perry.
From the Viking 2. Goff turns, fakes the give, sets the pocket, left side, wide open, touchdown, Detroit Lions, Sam Laporta, number 10 on the season for the rookie tight end.
Prescott's in the gun, back to throw, looking right, scrambles left, still got it, scrambles back right, throws it in the end zone, caught for a touchdown in the back of the end zone by C.D. Lamb.
One more kneel down. Here's the final snap of the game to Baker Mayfield. The kneel is down. The shutout preserved. The Buccaneers win our third consecutive NFC South championship. Celebrate, Buccaneers. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are in the playoffs with a 9-8 record.
So many things have to go right, and I congratulate Washington, undefeated, taking on all comers. You know, I can see why they've won all their games. I mean, they're an outstanding, thorough, solid football team in every way.
You know, in the end, no. Someone's going to be a national champion, and that's the greatest piece of it all is making sure you're putting in all the preparation. So we're diving into all that, but the preparation is what's going to lead to the success on game day.
Good morning. Welcome into Hurrdat Sports Radio here on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live from the H&H Chevrolet stage at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me. Good morning. What's going on, man?
Hey, good things. All good things, right? Except for the incoming weather,
right?
Could be a little dicey. A lot of snow coming in, and already this morning, my driveway was a little slick. I ended up grabbing the container of salt. I'm shocked, too, that I have a container of salt on standby.
You pre-salted?
I pre-salted the driveway.
Look at you.
I feel like a real dad.
You're just adulting so hard this morning.
I was up super early. Now, granted, it was for my job, but I was up super early.
Yep.
I was like, I'm going to make sure, for example, my dad this past weekend back in St. Louis gets up before everybody else. It snowed there on Sunday. He brushed off everybody's car.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
Nice.
So it's like the dad thing to do to be out there before anybody else. That's how I felt this morning. And I know it was very easy because I was just shaking the container of salt on the driveway. But I'm like, I'm going to be ready.
It's a little victories.
And it was a win. When I was doing it, I'm like, man, I feel good.
Exactly.
I feel really good right now.
Now, the only thing that could make you more like dad, middle-aged man type thing, you grab your knee, be like, ooh, it's going to be a bad one. There's a lot of snow coming. I can feel it.
My left knee. Oh, man.
I'll never,
Sam Laporta.
I'll never trust a meteorologist as much as I do this good old left knee. We've got, so hopefully you stay safe out there. If you do have to be out and about, be careful. We've got some precipitation already in the snow.
And funny enough, I have to go get a rental car today because I'm dropping off my car at Dingman's. So I think it's highly ironic that I'm picking up a new car on the day that you shouldn't be driving around a lot. At least what the meteorologists are telling us. That you shouldn't be on the road too much or be really careful when you are on the road. I'm on the road a ton trying to navigate back home.
Yep. Well, you stay safe. Everybody else stay safe. If you're out and about today, you can, of course, join us also on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Join us in the YouTube comments as a bunch of folks already have. Appreciate all of our early risers this morning. But we've got a big show for you. As the clip indicated, we are going to crown a national champion tonight. I'm excited. I'm also a little sad. We talked about this last week. It's the last college football game of the season.
That it is.
Very excited for the game. A little sad that we won't have college football for another 8 months.
I hadn't thought about that again until you brought it up. So thanks.
I'm sorry. I'm just the Debbie Downer of the group here. But
you just always like to think of the negative. I'm team positive. That's how we balance each other out.
It's true. It's called balance. It's how it works out. But super excited for Michigan and Washington tonight. We're going to talk to a bunch of our good friends about not just the game, but we're going to talk about, there's a lot going on with Nebraska as well. We'll talk to Sam McKewon at 8 o'clock from the Omaha World-Herald. Talk to our old friend DB at 8:30 and 8:45. Had to give him 2 spots, give him a little room.
We can't give him the 8:30 because you'll say one thing and then the segment will be over.
Well, that's the thing is we won't even get to a real topic at 8:30. We'll just get through all of our, having fun with each other. And so 8:45, we actually have to get into some stuff. So we'll get DB for 2 segments this morning. We've got Matt Hladik from thespun.com. He covers college football and college basketball. And then we've got a little bit of some fun planned for you at the end of the show. We'll do our national title game breakdown and picks at 9:30. And then 9:45, our friends over at Warhorse Sportsbook, they have a prop sheet. And it's a little preview, okay? It's a prop sheet challenge. If you've been over to the casino in the last month, you know about it already. Hopefully you got signed up.
Festival of Games.
You heard us talking about it for the last week. We're talking about it for the Pro Football Championship, but for the College Football Championship, they did one as well. And we're going to try and go through some of their props. And
what do they call the Pro Football Championship in media? The big game?
The big game.
The big game.
Yeah.
I feel like I've said the actual name of it before
on
air plenty of times, and no one's come after me for it.
Well, so you can say it if you're not promoting something. That's the rule. Right.
Right.
So if you're,
but I think I have said it when I was promoting.
You gotta be careful there. So they get a little cranky if you're not an official sponsor and you use the name. But the Pro Football Championship, everybody knows what we're talking about. The big game, if you will. And we'll tell you more about
that. Come up with a new one by the time the
by the time the big game comes around. By the time the big game comes around, we'll come up with a better name for it. We'll call it the Duper Ball.
I was just doing the Sue.
Yeah, our guy Ndamukong Suh, TikTok star Ndamukong Suh.
Yeah, I think that's him.
But we will do a prop card challenge at the end of the show regarding the college football national championship. It'll be a fun time. But wanted to start off today with Nebraska, a big weekend for the Husker football team. They got a couple of key transfers that at huge positions of need. I think they still feel good about the second wide receiver, Jamal Banks, but Isaiah Nair from Texas and Dante Dowdell from Oregon have committed. They're in. That is a couple of huge pickups. I think Banks would be bigger than Nair if they're able to land Banks, just because his production the last couple of years has been better. Nair is banged up and then got buried on the depth chart of Texas. But Dowdell is a huge get out of Oregon, and Nair adds some much-needed depth and experience in that wide receiving room. I was told they still feel good about Jamal Banks as well, so I wouldn't be surprised if they end up going 3 for 3 this weekend on their offensive skill guys that they were trying to land, and that would be huge.
Yeah, it had me thinking a little bit last night because you're right. One, especially Dowdell in the running back room, super talented individual, top player coming out of Mississippi when he first made his way to college ball. I mean, anybody that starts their career at Oregon is somebody to keep an eye on if he enters the transfer portal. And then Nair, incredible at Wyoming. Had some great numbers there. Just didn't work out at Texas, but the injury bug hit him pretty hard. As I sat back last night, I was thinking a lot of questions were running through my head, and I'll ask you too, because maybe you'll be able to break a few things down with me. So where were you at in terms of team completement before these signings versus where you are at now? So how far did the needle move when Dowdell's name came across Twitter over the weekend, when Nair's name came across Twitter over the weekend? How far did it move in terms of overall grade for the offense? Did it go from a B to an A minus? Did it go from a B plus to an A? Okay. And then I was like, okay, well, are you finally comfortable where the offense stands? If this is where everything ends, like, would you like to see more? Was it already good enough in your eyes if these additions didn't happen? So these are the questions that just keep popping into my head. And I thought, okay, one, I think adding depth to the room, that has to be where everybody lands. So I think that last question I asked, was it already good enough? And these are just good depth pieces. just sits with good depth pieces. Although some people out there may say, no, they were good, and I would have been comfortable going into the season with what they had. And, that may be true too. But all in all, two guys like this in positions of need, again, something that you said in that opening thought, that has to elevate your letter grade for this offense in particular. Not just team, just offense.
Yeah, I think Dowdell moves the needle for me more than Nair because I'm more bullish on the wide receiver group. I like a lot of those guys. I think between Malik.
But there wasn't a true veteran in the room.
There's not.
Outside of Bullock.
There's really not. But I like Coleman, Lloyd. They were the highest on Doss coming out of the fall camp before he got injured, and they're super high on Demetrius Bell. That's four guys right there without really stretching. Then you're not even getting into true freshmen at that point, right? They're super high on Ja'Cory Barney, it sounds like, as a fifth guy. Then you've got Bullock, who got a lot of experience last year. If you're sitting there and Bullock's like your fourth to sixth receiver instead of your 1, 2, or 3, you feel way better. And that's not a knock on Bullock, right?
No question.
But he was a walk-on for a reason at a certain point, and I'm sure he's gotten a lot better. And you saw some moments where he was an effective receiver for them, but you're way more comfortable if he's in the back half of that group.
It's a good route runner.
Good route runner. A really good athlete. I don't know what his ceiling is. He certainly doesn't have the Malachi Coleman, Jaden Doss, Demetrius Bell, Jalen Lloyd ceiling, right? So that's my more concern with Alex Bullock. Josh is on the other side. But
who knows? Maybe it's John Bullock. John Bullock.
Yeah,
maybe John though moves again and goes to offense. Who knows? He was really good on defense. Please don't move.
No, absolutely. Was Josh Bullock the old safety? Was it Josh and Daniel back in the 2000s? Is that who
You're thinking of Josh.
Okay, from back in the Pelini days, right?
It sounds really familiar.
Okay,
yes.
I'm confusing never mind. I'm old. Anyway,
you solved the mystery.
Yeah, I just needed that in my head to make sense. But
there's a guy named Josh Bullock that pitched at UNO. Was it him?
No, I think Josh and Daniel Bullock played safety for Nebraska back in the mid 2000s.
All right, let's do some digging. The best thing
he did,
the best thing about today is you can look something up in an instant, Robbie. Did you know that?
It's terrific. Yeah, he was a second round pick of the Saints out of Nebraska. Okay, I feel better.
Is that good?
That's not bad. Yeah, he was very good, and then he had the counterpart back in the secondary named Daniel Bullock. Anyway, that's where I was getting confused. Thank you. We are done now on that. Anyway, so they've got
stamp it in.
Send it off. So I'm more bullish on the wide receiver group than I was on the running back group, just because I worry about the nature of the injuries that the two guys are coming back from. And so I didn't feel as solid on that. I like Emmett Johnson. I know they're really high on Quentin Ives. I'm not sure on Gabe Ervin because Gabe was the hip, right? It was Gabe's hip and Ramir's shoulder. They kept him out for the season. I feel a little bit weird about the hip injuries. Freak me out a little bit, man. Everything gets controlled in that hip region in terms of your movement and your athleticism. So I'm a little concerned about that with Gabe Ervin. And then Ramir, he's been in the program for a long time, and we haven't gotten that kind of breakthrough from him that we've always thought was sort of out there. So I don't think you can rely on him for a ton of production necessarily. He, to me, again, is more of a depth piece. So I think bringing a guy into that room and listen, that's not to say that Ramir can't be a good player, but I don't think he can be like an every down type guy. She hasn't shown that to this point in his career. So bringing again,
has he really had the opportunity though?
Well, he's been banged up a lot too, so that's hard to say. He's gotten banged up quite a bit. There's been different guys they've had kind of fascinations with, but there has been a couple opportunities where he was kind of tabbed the starter for stretches, and either because of injury or because of lack of production or whatever, it just didn't end up working out. So I think he can be kind of a nice third down back flex piece. I don't know if he can be like, hey, we're going to put you on the field for 15 carries or even, if you can get 5 to 7 carries and a couple receptions out of him, I feel like you feel good a game. But Adding Dowdell, big-bodied back, obviously highly recruited coming out of high school, didn't play a ton last year at Oregon. That's a huge piece there. The guy that's still dangling out there, Jamal Banks, that would be the biggest of the three because he's got a ton of production at a Power 5 school. That would be really, really big for them. But
made some really nice catches over his career too.
Of the guys that of Nair and Dowdell, it does move the needle for me in terms of what I think of the offense from probably, I'm going to say from a B- to a B. If they get Banks or another veteran wide receiver that has Power 5 production, that bumps it to a B+ for me. And then this is a weird one. If they get a backup quarterback that's not Heinrich Haarberg, no offense to Heinrich Haarberg, but you're going to have to, if Heinrich Haarberg is your primary backup, you have to run a different offense than you're running for Dylan Raiola. Like Heinrich Haarberg can't run that offense, whatever it is, right? And so if you get a backup quarterback that I can at least feel, listen, I don't need anybody crazy because the position you're asking them to come into, you're not going to get a real high-level guy out of the portal, right? But if you get somebody, I use this example with a buddy of mine over the weekend. If you get an Iowa-esque quarterback, a guy that can just keep it on the road for 2 games, if somebody gets banged up or something, or a quarter because somebody's got to retape an ankle or whatever, if you just get one of those guys, I would feel better. A guy that can not turn the ball over and at least semi-functionally run the offense without it just totally going into the ditch. I don't need you to be Dylan Raiola. I don't even need you to be a full-time Power 5 starter. I just need you to be a guy that can keep the car on the road for a little bit. And if you get that guy, all of a sudden I feel like an A- about the offense, which think about where we were even 2 months ago to say that you feel like the offense is an A-.
Well, it helps when you get your quarterback.
Yeah, it helps when you have the best quarterback.
You feel the biggest need on
the
field.
Yes, 100%. I mean, that takes it from a D+ to that B- by itself, like we were talking
Robbie,
about.
are you saying just instantly slot Dylan Raiola as your starting quarterback?
I'm saying that's how I do it. If you're in the coaching staff, you can't do that. You got to see him take a snap first. But yeah, I fully expect him to be the starting quarterback day one. That's my New Year's resolution, remember? Dylan Raiola, day one starting quarterback. I just don't think you can go into spring and be like, hey, everybody else in this room, he's our number one before we see him take a snap. Like, that's not going to go over well. Even if everybody knows it, it's one of those things. It's like, hey, that's not an out loud thought right now. Like, we don't say those out loud right now.
Don't we talk about being honest and transparent with our guys?
Listen, if I bet if Danny Kaelin came out for whatever reason, if Danny Kaelin came out and was better than Dylan Raiola and it was unquestionable, I guarantee you Matt Rule would start him. Guarantee it. I don't think there's a world in which that happens. So that's what we're talking about here, because there's a difference between being honest and transparent, being like, hey, whoever the best guy is going to win the job. That's true. There's also, I don't think, any world with the quarterbacks currently in the room where Dylan Raiola is not the best guy.
There's no world that if a guy comes out and balls out more than another player that they wouldn't start.
Well, that's what I mean, though. So that's you can be saying both things and have it still be true.
Yeah.
I still need Dylan Raiola to take a single spring practice snap before I name him my starter.
You said a lot of good things, though, in that point. And one that really stuck out to me was the offenses that you'll have to run if you are Dylan Raiola.
Yeah, if Haarberg's your primary backup.
Or if you're Heinrich Haarberg. Yeah. And right now it looks like Heinrich's going to be the primary backup.
I think they want to redshirt Danny, yeah.
And if that is the case, again, they're going to have to build more depth in that room. But 2, just picture what the Saints do and think that's exactly how Nebraska will operate too.
Because that's how they would use
You have
Haarberg.
a true pocket passer in Derek Carr, right? Dylan Raiola, more of a pocket passer than a scrambler. Then you have Taysom Hill and Heinrich Haarberg, who essentially play the exact same thing.
Absolutely.
I don't know, and I think this would be interesting. Maybe somebody can look this up who's listening right now, what Taysom Hill's record is as the starting quarterback with the Saints, because I think that could be a good way to justify if when you make a change like that, if it's needed, say when Derek Carr was hurt this year, the change in offensive approach, how well that carries over in an instant. So if anybody can dig that up for me, I'd be curious because, yes, Heinrich's done it before, but Taysom Hill's done it before too. And then it's the same thing with if you are coming in as a backup, are you going to instantly build momentum, or are you going to kind of slowly catch up to speed?
So it looks like he has started 9 games in his career. He's 7-2 in those 9 games, but he has not started a game at quarterback since 2021. So it's been 2 full seasons at this point since he started a game at quarterback. But in 2020 and 2021, he started 9 games combined and went 7-2.
Okay.
The passing numbers are okay. They're not bad. I mean, the second year he threw 4 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, so you're not going to love that.
So it's just kind of doing like extra credit. So so Nebraska needs to be prepared to do 2 things at once. They have to be the overachiever in school, where yes, they're studying for this one topic, which is Dylan Raiola in the spring in the offseason, and then, worst case scenario, if it has to boil down to Heinrich, you have to also know how his offense operates opposed to how DR's operates. So being able to stay ahead of the curve, ahead of the game, that will highly benefit them, just like how the Saints work when Taysom Hill is the starter.
Yeah, I mean, I would actually fully expect them to have some packages for Heinrich Haarberg, whether that
throughout the game, yeah. They'll mix
some
a few
Taysom
things
Hill
in.
like packages where it's kind of a wildcat. It's a QB run situation. I don't expect, unless there is, I really don't expect Heinrich Haarberg to be your primary backup quarterback next year. I think they will bring someone in for that role. Not to say that he wouldn't be capable for stretches to fill in if needed. I don't think they want to go that route in terms of just how different the offenses would have to be. Now, speaking of the offense, there is another rumor out there of someone that might be joining Nebraska, and that is former West Virginia, Houston. Is there another
Texas Tech OC?
Yeah, Oklahoma State OC. Is it just the 2 head coaching jobs?
It's just the 2 head coaching jobs the last 5 years.
Dana Holgorsen. If that name sounds familiar to you, it should. He's been the architect of some of the most explosive offenses that we've seen in college football over the last 20 years almost. I mean, if you want to go all the way back to the Oklahoma State and Texas Tech days as a coordinator, he is a disciple of the Mike Leach tree in terms of the spread offense. Yeah, he started at Texas Tech as wide receiver coach back in 2000 and was their offensive coordinator by 2005. So he is a certified offensive, savant, if you will. He knows what he's doing. He's been a head coach since 2011 and just recently left Houston. Got fired. I don't know. That was a little bit of a.
It would be more of a. We pushed you out the door more than, hey, I left on good terms.
Right, and he's had some really, really good teams at both stops. He was seen in Lincoln at the wrestling match with the football team, and
what was happening at that wrestling match?
We'll get to that. We'll get more on Dana Holgorsen, what he was maybe doing in Lincoln, and what the entire football team seemingly was doing at the Nebraska wrestling match. Yeah, Saturday.
I'll tell you what, too, Ravi.
What's that?
When we come back, I'm going to give you 4 quarterback names, 4 Dana Holgorsen quarterback names.
Okay.
And if Dylan Raiola
can turn into any of them,
I think you'll be pretty happy.
You feel pretty good. We got more Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next.
We will be back. We will be back.
By NFL rookies for most receiving yards in a
Jake Bailey punts this one away. It's a wobbler. Backing Hardy up to his own 5. Gets to the 10, to the... Gonna get him! Deontay Hardy going the distance for the touchdown!
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back.
Jake.
You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Jake Bailey punts this one away. It's a wobbler. Backing Hardy up to his own 5. Gets to the 10, to the 15, through a hole to the 20, 25, 30. He could go 50, 40. They're not going to get him. Deontay Hardy going the distance for the touchdown.
Welcome back, Hurrdat Sports Radio here on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. Hope you are staying safe out there as the precipitation starts to come down. I don't think we actually have any snow yet. We've just got some cold rain, so be careful out there.
Snow started at 8 or 8:30?
Sometime around there. I'm not sure. We are live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. You can join us in the comments, where apparently people need to be reminded again that production and talent are not the same thing. A couple of jabs in there about good old Trevor Lawrence, which I, stand by the talent, not the production.
Hey,
it's a different thing.
TK's just here to ruffle your feathers, man.
That's fine.
Don't buy in.
Some guy that we hope that will be both productive as he is talented is our guy Dylan Raiola.
Mm-hmm.
And how that happens is going to, I think, hinge a lot on the offensive staff that Coach Rule ends up bringing in. We teased it before the break that Dana Holgorsen was in Lincoln with the football team at the wrestling match. So we'll start with the wrestling match real quick, because it was a super cool scene and moment for Nash Hutmacher, who was, I'm sure people know this by now, but to recap, an incredible wrestler in high school in South Dakota, 166-0, everybody I've heard talk about it says he's a better wrestler than he is a football player, and he's probably an NFL football player if he has another year like he did this year. So you've got this really, really good defensive lineman for Nebraska, drops some weight, ends up getting down to that 285 number for his heavyweight class, and gets I believe it's a submission a win by fall. I look at him like, oh, he pinned that guy. That's all I know. But he had I believe it was in the first period, had a dominating performance.
It was straight domination.
Oh
too.
Yeah, just
it
manhandled
wasn't even close.
Did you see how much, they're in the same weight class? Did you see how much bigger he looked than the other guy? That's wild to me. But it was really, really cool, not only to see Nash kind of in his element, it seemed like, in a way that it's cool to see people excel at things that they're obviously really good at. But we also saw the football team in mass. I know it wasn't the entire team, but it was
really cool too.
A ton of the team, a ton of the coaching staff, and Dana Holgorsen was there hanging out with the football team, watching Nash Hutmacher dominate his wrestling match. And so this rumor had kind of started getting going before the match that Nebraska's maybe been talking to Dana Holgorsen. And then people are like, oh no, he's in Lincoln. And then he was just in public with the coaching staff. I love how they didn't try and have this kind of clandestine meeting or anything. They're just like, nope, we're going to march you right out in public. Just like, like when Coach Rule came into town before he actually took the job, it was this very underground thing. And you only knew about it if you were either happened to see him like you worked at the airport or something, or you knew somebody within the athletic department, and they kept the lid on that thing pretty tight. Had this little secret meeting in Lincoln to check things out, I think back in October before he actually got hired. And totally opposite vibe here. Dana Holgorsen's there, and Matt Rule's like, yeah, we're just going to go to this wrestling match in public. Probably one of the more, because the fact that a Nebraska football player was there, probably one of the most viewed wrestling matches that Nebraska's had in a while, which is not a reflection of their program. It's a terrific program under Coach Manning. But because you got the Nebraska football connection, it was an even bigger deal for the casual audience. And so it gets to thinking, right? Okay, so if they're talking to Dana Holgorsen, what would that look like in terms of his role on the staff? Who moves other places to make room for him, things like that. I think the most likely option is he becomes an analyst. That's what I think this is, because for a couple reasons. Obviously, he's got the pedigree to be a co-OC, because I don't think Satterfield's going anywhere. But he's got the pedigree to be a co-OC or quarterback coach or both or whatever. But there's two things that make me think that he might be an analyst. One, I still feel very good about my Glenn Thomas information of him coming in and being the quarterback coach. Now, theoretically, they could bring in both. If you're moving someone else to a different spot, say if they start allowing analysts to coach in practice, you could move Ed Foley to an analyst role and he could still kind of coach your special teams in practice. Or if, EJ Barthel moves on for some reason. There's been there's been whispers about that. You could move guys around a little bit. So it's possible both could end up on the actual staff. But the other thing that and this is where I think it gets a little dicey about bringing him on as an actual coach, is you remember what happened to the first tight ends coach last year?
I do.
He got a DUI, had a little problem with some alcohol, and he was gone super, super quickly. Okay. This is a guy that they brought in specifically because of his connections to Texas and didn't have a history of really that we know of at least, and made this mistake, and he was gone really quickly. That's the same kind of baggage that Dana Holgorsen brings in here. Now, I don't know specifically if he's had a DUI, but he has had public alcohol-related incidents at his previous stops. And I just wonder if that's something that Coach Rule would bring into a high-profile, high-leverage situation when they really need to get it right this year. Obviously, Dana Holgorsen's coaching ability is unquestioned. His offensive ability, his quarterback pedigree that I know you wanted to get into as well is unquestioned. And I know Coach Rule believes in second chances and all that kind of stuff too. So I'm not saying it's impossible. But between his history, how we saw Coach Rule treat that last year, and the fact that I do still think my Glenn Thomas information is good, I think for me that leans analyst, because if for some reason he has an issue as an analyst, it's a much less big deal if you move on from him than if you hire an OC, he has a problem, then you have to get rid of him.
Yeah, I don't really look at the previous instances as a problem in terms of bringing Dana Holgorsen into the program, because I mean, we've seen things before. Like, let's just take Steve Sarkisian, for example. Like, he had his fair share of alcohol issues and antidepressant issues, and look what he did when he turned his life around. So I don't want to sit here and be critical.
But he started that with an analyst job at Alabama. That's how he started the turnaround.
And that's fine. But I don't think that's going to deter Nebraska from Dana Holgorsen. But with Wager, it was different because he was already there. So when it happened under the nose of Coach Rule, it was an easy thing to say, okay, let's move on from him. But a lot of good things in terms of what Holgorsen can bring.
Yeah.
And I think there's two right off the bat. One being that he has the quarterback's coach experience. If they don't get Glenn Thomas, if they don't get another guy that has quarterback coach experience, Dana Holgorsen fills that void right away.
Yeah, terrific option.
And two, it goes back to what I said in terms of those New Year's resolutions that we went through. When I said keep a short leash on Coach Satterfield, it's kind of like planning ahead by having Holgorsen in-house. Yeah, because whether he is an analyst or whether he does jump in as a co-OC or a quarterback coach, whatever, you have somebody right then and there to be like, all right, man, we tried this. It didn't work out. We're going to move on, but we don't really have to move on in a way where we turn over everything, because we have a guy that we've been
in-house
grooming to what we want this offense to look like and what he can bring.
So has made millions as a play caller. He's made his entire career as a play caller.
So I think it's really smart what Coach Rule is doing. And the second point to that too is this. And I had mentioned that there were some quarterbacks that Dana Holgorsen produced at his previous stops. If Dylan Raiola can become one of these four, Nebraska football is going to be back. They will be back. His last stop at Houston, he had Clayton Tune. And Clayton Tune didn't have the best, super senior season, but the season before, or was it 2021? When did they go 12-2?
2021, they went 12-2.
When they went 12-2 in 2020, Clayton Tune was awesome.
Yeah.
He was absolutely
and his career numbers are incredible.
Yeah, he's got great college career numbers. Before that, he was at West Virginia. Who did West Virginia have? A guy by the name of Will Greer. His numbers were sick.
He also had Geno Smith on the front end of that.
Yes, he did. And so, but I'm going to stick with Will Greer just at the West Virginia stop to go with my 4 here. But Geno Smith is a great tack on. Brandon Whedon at Oklahoma State.
Yep.
When he was the OC there. And then how about Case Keenum at his first stop at Houston? Who is Case Keenum? Oh, just the all-time total passing yards and touchdown leader as a college quarterback.
Don't forget about Graham Harrell when he was at Texas Tech as well.
Hey, we can keep going down the list.
We certainly can. More Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next.
We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio. Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Wrapping up hour number one here on Hurrdat Sports Radio on a Monday morning here on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We are live from the H&H Chevrolet stage at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill. We are also live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Make sure you check out the comment section over there. We've got some people chiming in on the offense.
A lot of people chiming in.
TK chimes in regarding the offensive kind of prowess of Dana Holgerson, who we were talking about last segment. He says, All those numbers are great and all, but we need our offense, in my opinion, to look like Michigan: run first, pass second. All the passes are highly efficient plays. I don't disagree. I also think that having an offense where you run dramatically more than you pass is a waste of having a 5-star quarterback. I'm not saying it has to be an air raid system, and I don't think Coach Rule would want to do that. But if you go back and look, especially at some of his West Virginia teams, Holgorsen was very good at playing to the strengths of his teams.
Mm-hmm.
There were some years where the rushing offense, I can't remember which year it was, but there was one year where I believe he really leaned into the rushing offense because that's where the talent of his team led him. I don't think it is a Mark Whipple situation where he has no interest in running the football whatsoever. I also don't think Coach Rule would bring someone in like that. That doesn't seem to be his brand of physical football. And so I think what you want Dana Holgorsen for is passing game concepts. You're talking about highly efficient passes. Nobody has more highly efficient passes than the air raid offense. That's what it's built on. That's what it does.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the entire point of the air raid offense. So bringing in a guy with those principles, to me, makes a ton of sense. Now, I agree. I don't want to see a Texas Tech offense probably next year at Nebraska. I want to see more physicality. I want to see the running game leaned into a little bit more. I don't think throwing the ball 60, 70 times is
right, because that's how you control the game.
Yes.
By staying a little more 50-50.
And everything that Coach Rule has talked about is controlling the game, being physical, all of those things. So I don't think you need to worry about, oh no, all of a sudden we're going to see, a Texas Tech offense or a Houston offense or whatever. To me, this is more about passing game concepts. And the air raid passing game concepts are as good as anybody's. I think that's where you need to focus with this Dana Holgorsen thing.
Yeah, well, I don't want to say that Dylan Raiola would be a waste of a 5-star if they did run the ball more than they threw, because if you look at J.J. McCarthy, like, I know he was a 4-star coming out of high school, but you can pretty much
highly related guy.
You could consider him a 5-star at this point.
Yeah.
Because if he entered the transfer portal, he would be a 5-star.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So, but no one would call him a waste at Michigan for how they've used him. I mean, shoot, he was almost the Heisman Trophy winner this year. So, like, I don't think that's as big of a worry. I know where you're going with the concept portion of it, because I think that's really important. But in terms of what Dana Holgorsen can really bring, I think it's just more development at that quarterback position, because he knows how to do that, and he knows how to make those quarterbacks successful. Because even at those previous stops, right, we'll dismiss some of those Houston examples, because Case Keenum threw the ball an absolute boatload.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like a crazy amount. He wouldn't be the total passing yards leader if he didn't. But to have numbers kind of like what you saw, Will Greer's numbers his senior season were similar to what Bo Nix did this year. If you got that out of Dylan Raiola, you'd be happy. And I think Oregon did a nice job of mixing in Bucky Irving, whether that was in the screen game or running the football as well. Now, I don't know the actual percentage of how often they threw versus how often they ran. I would guess that they threw significantly more than you've seen Michigan throw the football this year. But still, if you could get that out of your quarterback, I think you'd be very, very happy.
Yeah, obviously, like, Bo Nix is a great example. Like, Bo Nix and the Oregon offense is a great example of what I think it should look like at Nebraska with a Dylan Raiola. You're passing the ball enough to make sure you're taking advantage of one of the best players on your team and getting the most production out of him, but you're not relying solely on the pass and totally neglecting the run game. And what did we say all year? That Oregon team is one of the most physical teams in the country. That's a really good blueprint for what Nebraska wants to be. Coach Rule has used, you brought up J.J. McCarthy. He's used Michigan as a blueprint of what they want to be, a super physical team that also has the potential for a dynamic offense. You mentioned Will Greer. He threw it about 36 times a game his senior year, had 3,800 yards, completed 67% of his passes, 37 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. You take that all day long, right? Those are great numbers. It's not throwing an overly huge amount, because if you're throwing 36 times, let's say you run 65, 66 plays a game, you're basically talking about 35 passes, 30 runs. You can live with that, right?
Amen.
You get to 70 plays, maybe you get a little bit more offensive plays out of there. Talking maybe 35, 35, 36, 34. You could be pretty close to 50-50 and still get a ton of running in there and take advantage of the talent of Dylan Raiola. So I agree. I don't think you want to see a traditional air raid in terms of the actual numbers of passes that you see out of some of those offenses. But again, the passing concepts and some of the ways we've seen it play out, Bo Nix is a great example. I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, and I just looked up the numbers. Oregon's offense was roughly 54-46 this year in terms of pass to rush.
Yeah.
With total plays. They ran 951 plays this year. 437 of them were run plays.
Yeah, out of how many games? 12? They played 12 games?
Yeah.
So you're talking
13?
Yeah, because they played in the Pac-12 championship. Right. So you're talking they ran the ball 34 times a game, if my math is anywhere close.
You'll take those numbers.
That's a good number. That's not a traditional air raid.
Now you have to be successful too, and Bucky Irving was highly successful running the football this
year. And hopefully, speaking of Oregon, hopefully Dante Dowdell is just as successful next year. But that's something that I think you can look at in terms of potential for what the offense could look like, even if you do bring in somebody like Dana Holgorsen, regardless of what that role for him is. Wanted to catch you up on a couple things going on this morning. Ron Rivera from the Washington Commanders has already been fired. It appears that Bill Belichick is having a meeting this morning. We don't know quite yet if he's going to survive the morning.
Question.
Yes, sir.
Was Ron Rivera first on your bingo card of coach to get fired?
Well, so Arthur Smith actually got fired late I think technically into today.
Okay, so
East Coast time, I think it was 2 minutes past
question,
midnight. Yes.
Then since we'll count yesterday too, was Arthur Smith first on your bingo card to get fired?
Pretty high, I think. Yeah.
Was he number one though?
I don't know that I had let me look at my list here.
All you have to do is go on the NFL standings and say this coach, that coach.
No, I know, but I did have, because we talked last week of guys that I think could get fired. So
right.
I did have a list again. I think Arthur Smith would have been pretty high up there. I think he probably would have been my number one.
I think Rivera actually would have been my number one. Because I thought he should have been fired mid-season, but I get why Washington just held on to him, because why make that change if you can just wait till the offseason? Because they probably have somebody else in mind that they want, and instead of going the interim route, they're just like, what's the difference of Ron Rivera and where we're at as a team right now? Because they sold at the trade deadline. They got rid of everybody.
Yeah, they got rid of Sweat. They got rid of
defensively.
Young.
They became nothing.
Got rid of
abysmal.
Yeah.
So at that point, you're just like, I kind of gave up, so I'll just keep Ron Rivera. It's whatever. Maybe it was
I would have had Arthur Smith first.
Maybe it was like a touching touch to him and his problems off the field. And so they just wanted him to kind of like have a good memory to finish out on, right? Maybe. I don't know. I'm just thinking they're looking out for the guy. But yes, I thought he should have been fired a long time ago. That would have been my number one. If I made a top three of who would get fired first, I would have put Ron Rivera and then Arthur Smith. I was shocked to see Smith go. Well, I wasn't shocked to see him go, but before Ron Rivera.
Yeah, I would have gone Smith because I felt like Atlanta maybe should have been better than Washington was. So I didn't think that Rivera may necessarily underperform to the degree that Ron Rivera.
They need a quarterback.
They do. I mean, both of them need quarterbacks. I don't know if Sam Howell is the answer.
He looked like it for a little while. Yeah. He looked like it more than Desmond
Desmond Ritter certainly is not. I don't know that Sam Howell is. I don't think so.
I just don't know either, though. Sam Howell has who? Terry McLaurin.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. Logan Thomas is doctor injury.
Yep.
Jahan Dotson had like a really decent rookie season last year and then kind of just stalled. Do they still have Curtis Samuel?
They do still have Curtis Samuel.
He didn't have as big of a year as he had last season.
No, he ended up, he did okay. He had 62 receptions.
And
but
Sam had some good
yards.
moments where he had some big games where he threw for close to 300 yards, if not more.
Yeah.
But how much time did he actually have to throw the football this year?
Yeah,
I'd like to know where he falls on the sack list.
Sure.
Versus how efficient he was.
He got sacked
as a quarterback.
61 times or 65 times, excuse me.
That's a lot.
It is a lot. He also threw 21 interceptions, which is
also But when you're sacked 61 times and you're forced to get rid of the ball early, sometimes you're either forcing it into a window or you get it, tipped or blocked at the line, or you're rushing your throw and then you make an errant throw because of it.
Yeah. I don't know. When I was watching him, I don't know if I think he's the guy. He put up good numbers for stretches. He threw for a lot of yards. I don't know if I'm Washington, I don't know if I look at that guy and say, yep, that's my guy moving forward into, whatever this rebuild ends up looking like. I know Desmond Ritter's not the guy if you're Atlanta. But I thought Arthur Smith, listen, they both got fired for a reason. It's probably a coin flip which one deserved it more or deserved it first. But Arthur Smith was, at least on the East Coast, was our winner at back at 12:02 a.m. Eastern time when he got fired. So coming up next, we will talk to our guy Sam McKewon. Got a lot to catch up on with Nebraska football, as well as Nebraska basketball with a disappointing showing at Wisconsin over the weekend. We will get to all that and more coming up next on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio. Here is the sports editor for the Omaha World-Herald, Sam McKewon.
That's fine.
Sam McKewon.
We're gonna throw the ball, and you just stand back there and throw it where you want to go. That kind of thing.
Sam McKewon.
Are you guys going? Sure.
Now, Sam McKewon.
Kicking off hour number 3 here on Hurrdat. Hour number 2, not hour number 3. Hour number 2. It's a Monday. Give me a break. Kicking off hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. Joining us now on the Warhorse Sportsbook Hotline is Sam McKewon from the Omaha World-Herald. Sam, how are you this morning?
I'm good. How are you guys?
What's up, Sam? We're doing well. Hope you enjoyed your holidays. We haven't talked to you in a hot minute because we've been off for a couple Mondays.
It has been a while.
So it is good to catch back up
I need
with
my
you,
Sam McKewon fix.
Lots been going on with Nebraska, so plenty to talk to you about today. But let's start off with the transfer portal. Nebraska landing a couple skill position players in Isaiah Nair and Dante Dowdell. In your opinion, how much does that go to Nebraska having completed what they need on offense before the fall?
Well, I think they could potentially get – they're probably still going to try to get that Wake Forest receiver.
Yep.
He's got more options available to him. I don't think we'll know for sure what he's going to do until, I don't know, this week. But, I think, on the offensive side of the ball, you're close. You'll always kick the tires on whatever happens in the portal come spring, because you don't know which guys are going to leave. I mean, you can't guarantee that everybody's going to be there. So, you always have to gauge that part of it and assess, where you think the program's going to be. But, they're pretty close to probably where they want to be. They got to get a lot better. There's just no question about it. I think Dowdell is somebody who could maybe come in and play right away. Different kind of back than even Irvin. Gabe is a large guy, but he's not 6'2" and 220. Dowdell is a little bit taller, and so a little bit different back. And I think a true downhill guy. I think Gabe Irvin is a little bit of that, but not entirely. This guy's kind of a glider, and he kind of he runs under his pads and is kind of a rumbler, that way. Glides, but he's also just sort of a bowling ball, whereas Irvin likes to make moves. And so Dowdell's a little bit different from everybody they got. And it'll be interesting to see how he fits in. And then, the receiver, if he's healthy, I think you picked up a really good player. Obviously, Nebraska feels like he will be, or he wouldn't be joining the team.
Sam, you went through a long list of traits there for Dowdell, and you're right. With Nair, it's hard to assess because he's been off the field for over a year now, derailed by that injury. I think it was an ACL. But let's just say in this scenario, in a perfect world, both guys are healthy. Who do you think will have, just out of these two guys, because I want to leave Banks off the list until we know more about his status. Who do you think will have the greater impact in their particular room in 2024?
Probably the running back. Yeah, I think he's got an opportunity to play right away. Nair certainly could. I don't know that I would describe him as a slot receiver. So, I think there's some outside guys who also compete for time. And so, I'd say Dowdell, if he's healthy and he's ready to roll, I think he's a player who could make an immediate impact in Nebraska's offense.
We're talking with Sam McKewon from the Omaha World-Herald. Another guy that could potentially make an impact on Nebraska's offense was seen with the football team at the wrestling match on Saturday. That's Dana Holgorsen. What were your thoughts when you first started hearing and then seeing that Nebraska was talking to Dana Holgorsen?
It's an interesting one, and for a couple of reasons. I think for the first reason, what's the role? What exactly is it? This is not typically a guy that doesn't call plays. Mm-hmm. So he's been doing that pretty much for a long time and likes doing it and has honestly been good at doing it. Now the offense that he runs is a little different from what Nebraska's doing, or what even they've stated they want to do. I mean, the San Francisco 49ers is not really what Holgorsen's been doing in his time. That stands out to you. So exactly how do they want to incorporate, what's the role? To be clear, this guy could come in and be an analyst. I mean, or a high level, quality control person for a year to mitigate his salary. That kind of thing. I mean, there's always ways that you can execute that, and he can be a resource for this program, and not necessarily be a game day guy. He can kind of spend a year within this deal and give his thoughts and share it. If it's an offensive coordinator quarterback role, and I tend to believe that's what he's looking for, then what does that look like? How does that all shake out? The co-offensive coordinator role. What does the pass game look like? There's certain things that are true of an air raid system, not bad things. There's things about that system that really work, but there's certain things that are true in terms of its principles that you would incorporate. Where does Satterfield fit in? All those things, I think, are the things that come up. Holgorsen has a good track record with quarterbacks. He does. I mean, it's really good, actually. And, a lot of times people would be like, well, Lincoln Riley, sure, yes, of course, but, Lincoln Riley did that at Oklahoma and USC. And, Dana Holgorsen has developed NFL quarterbacks at Houston and West Virginia and Oklahoma State and West Virginia again and Houston again. Like, these are not, superstar places. And
they're big name guys.
Yeah. I don't, if you were to ask Geno Smith now, how much did Dana Holgorsen change your life? I don't know what he would say. But, Geno Smith wasn't probably not going to the NFL before Holgorsen got there. Case Keenum obviously was shaped by Holgorsen. Brandon Whedon, who wasn't very good in the NFL, but came to the
first round pick though.
Late. He was. So like all of these players, there's a really good track record there, and it's a different kind of track record than maybe Lincoln Riley. But so what? I mean, that hardly matters. I mean, you could go down the list of the best quarterbacks in the NFL right now. If you crafted 5 of them, and then you name the schools that they were from, none of them are Kyler Murray, and none of them are Baker Mayfield, and they're not Jalen Hurts either. Like it's Texas Tech and it's Wyoming and it's Iowa State, and so this is real stuff, and so. I think that's probably the interesting thing about him is he clearly has a track record on teaching quarterbacks how to throw the ball. Now they throw the ball in his system. So the key here is, can you marry these things together? Can it work? Again, everything that we have seen from Rule in the offseason is that they're really serious about changing the offense and getting it better. As well they should. Because again, as the media, we kind of downplayed this a little bit because it was the first year and all the rest. This is the worst offense they've had in 56 years.
Mm-hmm.
They were terrible. They turned the ball over 31 times. 31 times. They were terrible. And so, you can go up from terrible. There's really no place to go but up. But you cannot sugarcoat 31 turnovers, and I don't know how many of them came from the quarterback, but the quarterback play was perhaps the worst in the country, certainly the worst in Power 5, this side of Iowa City. And Nebraska benefits from the fact that Iowa was so bad that Nebraska doesn't look bad in comparison. But that's the only other team that played this poorly. I think there were 22 teams, 22 that scored. I can't remember what the number is. 21 or fewer points this year. I don't know if it's 22 or whatever. I put it in my column today. Only Iowa had a winning record. That's it. So you don't score less than 21 points a game and win games unless you're Iowa. They're the only one. So unless you want to do that and do what they're trying to do, which I don't think you want to try to do, then you better score some points.
Sam, could you look at this move as potentially a way for Nebraska to make it easier to move on from Satterfield if that time came. And I kind of asked that, like, in terms of like a smooth transition, because you said it, like, Holgerson's been calling plays his entire life. Yes, he has experience as a quarterback's coach as well. But say things don't go well with Satterfield again. Is this kind of, could it be looked at as a way if they bring Dana Holgerson in as, well, we have our guy in the room who knows how we want to operate, and this is the easiest way to transition?
I don't think so, and I'm not trying to disagree with you, but I don't know that Dana Holgerson will be there that long if he weren't here. I don't think so. I think he wants to be a head coach, obviously, you know, and what happened in Houston this year, first of all, how do I put this? The leadership down there can do what they want to do. And they said they fired him because, and maybe rightfully so, they looked at his recruiting class and they're like, you're not getting it done, and we don't know what you're doing. And so, but to be clear, they were 8-5 2 years ago, and he was fine. Then they go to the Big 12, and if you want to know the difference between the American Athletic Conference and just the Big 12, you know, because they went from 8-5 to 4-8. I think UCF was the only one of those 4 teams that won a bowl game. Cincinnati sucked. It's a whole different thing, which is why, you know, we're going to get the AP poll tonight, and I'm sure Liberty's going to be in there somewhere, and Liberty would go 2-10 in the Big 12. But, like, I'm sure Liberty will be ranked by bunches of people. They'll be like, well, look at the team. They won 13-1. They lost 45-6, and they could have lost 78-6. People. Like, and I used to be this person too. Like, I used to go, oh, look at all the wins. And then about 5 years ago, I stopped. And I'm like, I'm not ranking these teams anymore. I'm not doing it because they're not very good. Like, they're not good relative to the power conference teams. And I would make an exception for the Mountain West because the Mountain West is so much better. South Dakota State would beat Liberty tomorrow by 14. And no, South Dakota State's not going to get a single vote. And that team's better than Liberty and better than James Madison. You won't rank them, but like even South Dakota State, if you put them in the Big Ten, they go like, I don't know, 7-5. Like, it's just too hard. People don't really get it. And so, you know, he goes to the Big 12, they go 4-8. I guess he's the scapegoat for it. They got a new president. I think the new president didn't really want to deal with him, so they let him go. But he's going to be a head coach somewhere else. Like, that's not going to take him long to do. And I don't know where he's going to go, but a guy like that, I mean, they score too many points, and his offense is too much fun, and it puts too many butts in the seats. So he got them a $140 million football building. He did. It was him that did it because, you know, his predecessor, Manager Alpolite, was fired, and he got him a $140 million football building. And so he's going to go somewhere else and get some other school a $140 million football building. So, no, I don't think he's a long-term answer. I think he is, if you're going to bring him in, it may be as a year or two, and then he's going to go off, and some school's going to hire him. I think it's more reflective of where Rule's at. Like, they want to bring in as many minds as possible, and I don't know that I don't know if you can massage this thing to be exactly the role you want it to be. But, you know, again, I'll reel it back too. I don't think Marcus Satterfield was doing everything he wanted to do this most recent year. To be really honest with you, I don't think that was like his. Yeah, let's go run the load option. Like, I don't know that was his thing. And so, like, I think the HC has to get out of the way, and you got to turn off the film from the 1992 season, and like you got to let your people do what they want to do, or you just got to do it. And there's nothing. If Matt Rule wants to do that, he can do it. And I think, for what it's worth, I think he'd do a pretty good job. But you have to make those decisions, and that's what he's paid to do, is to decide who's going to do what and who's going to call what, and then kind of get out of the way. And I thought what happened was they went after Jeff Sims. That didn't look like it was supposed to look for whatever reason. It just didn't look right, and Sims was not right as a player. And then Harburg has to play, and everybody's like, okay, we got to change the whole thing. And then that worked for a little while. Then he got hurt. And then it's like, okay, yeah, our offense really is this bad. So I think they got they watched the bottom line a little bit, and they saw themselves winning games, and so they're like, yeah, we'll just kind of roll with this. We're winning some close games this way, and then down the stretch, and then you get to the end of the season, and you look back on it and say, irrespective of the fact that we went 5-7, and there wasn't a lot of talent here, 31 turnovers, which is almost 3 turnovers a game, and 18 points a game is not an acceptable standard for anybody. And so I think that meant changes coming. And, I don't know where Holgorsen lands in this whole thing. It's going to be interesting to see.
We're talking with Sam McKewon of the Omaha World-Herald. Sam, let's pretend for a minute that Holgorsen comes in some kind of impact role. So as opposed to like an analyst or something, I'm talking an on-field coach. How do you think the potential balance could look between what Matt Rule has stated he wants to be in terms of a physical football team that controls things and what Holgorsen has done historically in more of an air raid type pedigree? Like, how do you balance those two things in your brain?
I think you can be, you can run that offense and have some physicality to you. I think Washington State had that a few years, even though they didn't necessarily run the ball all the time. Running the ball is kind of like, it's not how many yards you run for. To some degree, it's how many yards you run for. But it's almost also like, okay, who are you going to be when you have to run the ball? Can you run the ball? And when you got to get in 4 or 6 minute offense, are you able to do that? So, Houston only ran for 120 yards a game, 4 yards a carry, which isn't bad.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's not bad. You can live with that. They weren't a terrible run offense. So there's things that you can incorporate. The pass game, the passing ideation in the system, I think is better for somebody who really knows that system to explain to you. But I would say that it makes a heck of a lot of sense. You're gonna, if teams want to get up on you, you're gonna try to go over the top, and when they don't get up on you and they want to play coverage, you got answers for that. And it's usually a pretty quick throwing game. It's not high completion rate. Quarterbacks learn how to think on the run. They get the ball out of their hands. All the good stuff. I would say that Nebraska's current passing offense is a little bit more slow developing. It's like, hey, when we drop back to pass, we want to throw it for 17 yards of completion. The air raid is more, when we drop back to pass, we're getting the ball out of our hands, and 20% of these passes are going to go down as passes, but they're really runs.
Mm-hmm.
They're run plays. Like a pitch pass, which is a little pitch forward, is a run play. That's not a pass play. That's a run play. The ball happens to trickle forward by a half inch. I would argue that every single pass that's completed behind the line of scrimmage could be counted as a run, not as a pass. Because that's what it's functioning as, and they haven't. The NCAA world doesn't agree with this, but so that's the way they kind of run their run game. There's other things that you can do, and so yeah, I think all those things can be incorporated. We'll just have to see. It's different than Mark Whipple's system. So Whipple does not run the air raid. It's different, but Nebraska did not want to run that. Couple years ago, they could have had Graham Harrell a couple years ago, and they chose Whipple, and now Harrell's at Purdue, and Purdue ran the ball pretty well. So you just never know.
Sam, I want to go back and revisit what the reason why Dana Holgorsen was in town, and it was to watch Nash Hutmacher on the mat. Well, that wasn't the reason he was in town, but
that's where he was.
One of his stops. Yeah, that's where we saw him in town. And I want to talk a little bit about Nash in this moment. And my question to you is this, because it had me thinking a little bit about Tyson Terry and his ability on the mats, but also him being committed to play defensive line at Nebraska. Is Nash Hutmacher an anomaly in terms of like doing something like this, moving from football to wrestling? I don't want to just say two sports, because there's a lot of players that play two sports, but in terms of making a move like this that we're seeing on the mats right now, or do you think we'll see more linemen see what Hutmacher has done or is currently doing and want to be a part of that too when it comes to training or competing in the off season?
It depends on if they want to get down to 285 pounds. So I think that has something to do with it. You know, there are some wrestlers obviously who, you know, can function at 197 and I don't know, would play running back or something, but there aren't many of them. There's very few of them, so it doesn't happen very often. Almost always. So the second lightest weight class is 197, then it goes up to 285. It used to be that you had an unbounded top weight. And you go back to the 80s, and there were guys that were 300 and some pounds. There might even have been a 400-pounder who was like really, really good. And so they would just wrestle. And to be clear, I think if you were to ask Mark Manning, I think he would tell you that he thinks that's how it should be. And I actually agree. Like I agree with you. I mean, I agree with that. I think you really should be that kind of, you know, that kind of top band. It was Chris Taylor was his name, and he was 6'5", and he was 400 pounds, and he was 87-0-1 at Iowa State. And he passed away. I think like in the 70s.
Yeah, 1979 looks like.
Yeah, so that was one guy, and then they had another guy. Iowa State had another one that wrestled for Gene Smith, who I think the Ohio State athletic director now, right? So they had some amazing, you know. So I think it should be the top band, but you got to get down to 285, and I don't think Tanner Farmer was willing to do that. I think Tanner Farmer would have been like an All Big Ten wrestler if he had kind of done that. But as you know, you may recall after his career at Nebraska, then he went, I think, down to what was it? I think he finished second in the D2 national championships or NAIA championships, and you know, went to the Olympic qualifier and all that stuff. That you can do all that. That's all possible. That's all doable. So Nash could do that, but you got to be willing to go to 285 to do it. We'll learn a lot about him. I'm sure they're intrigued to see how well he can do at this level. I suspect he's going to be pretty good, and then we'll just have to find out. Now, if he's willing to play at 300 pounds, you know, in football, then this shouldn't be that hard. But if he isn't, then it's hard. You know, like it's challenging to get down to the weight. They've had some great wrestlers at Nebraska. Tanner Farmer was great. Malik Collins was great. And Malik, you know, I would have loved to have seen Malik wrestle Tanner Farmer. and you know, in some sort of practice. I would have loved to have seen that. And of course, Harrison Phillips, who did not play in Nebraska, but he was a great wrestler. And so there's been a bunch of them. I think Nash is probably the best wrestler of the bunch. Malik obviously was the better defensive tackle, but Nash is the best wrestler of the bunch, and you know, we'll see. There's a real chance for him. You just really never know. Heavyweight wrestling matches by their nature are very, very close. So we'll see what happens.
That's Sam McKewon from the Omaha World-Herald. Sam, great to talk to you again. Great stuff as always. We'll catch up again next week.
Take care.
Thanks, Sam.
That's Sam McKewon from the Omaha World-Herald.
Imagine dropping 45 pounds in 33 days.
I want to talk about that because I think it's less dramatic than people are.
Really?
I do, yeah. But maybe DB knows a lot about wrestling. Let's catch up with DB coming up next. He can maybe give us a little insight on the cutting weight for our guy Nash Hutmacher as well. Damon Benny coming up next on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back.
Shotgun snap. And it is Mason Rudolph down the middle and on his way. That is Deontay Johnson, 30, 25. Shotgun.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Shotgun snap. And it is Mason Rudolph down the middle and on his way. That is Deontay Johnson, 30, 25, 15, 10. He's gone for that Steelers touchdown. 71 yards. Rudolph to Johnson.
We're halfway through the show here on Hurrdat Sports Radio on a Monday. No snow yet. We had a little precipitation earlier, but luckily I'm crossing my fingers that it holds off until we get out of here.
I was looking for during the break. Now it says 9, 80% chance at 9.
Ooh, okay. So hopefully you've gotten to work safely by now. We are efforting our guy, Damon Benning. Got a lot to talk to him about. But in the meantime,
supposed to stop at like 6 a.m. tomorrow.
Yeah, no,
what's it get for the temperature?
It's
at
basically
9?
It's still 32. Well, actually, it's 32 degrees at 9, but it goes up to 34 at 3. So who knows how well it will stick? It just depends on how much is there.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll see.
A lot of moisture in the air, yeah.
And that's your forecast here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
None of us are meteorologists. Don't take this as professional advice. What you should take as professional advice is the fact that it is pro time in Nebraska. It's time to go check out your Omaha Supernovas. They hit the court for the first ever Pro Volleyball Federation match on January 24th. That's just, what is that, 16 days away? That's barely 2 weeks away.
Carry the 2.
Numbers are hard. We will be kicking that off at the CHI Health Center at 7 p.m. on January 24th against the Atlanta Vibe. Go to supernovas.com to secure either season or single match tickets, which are now available. You can witness world-class talent as the Supernovas host the Atlanta Vibe for the first ever match of the Pro Volleyball Federation. There's going to be NCAA champions, All-Americans, Olympians. Join the volleyball movement sweeping across the country and see your Major League Volleyball team, the Omaha Supernovas. Again, that's supernovas.com for tickets. As we wait for DB here, we were we were kind of
talking about weight during the break.
Well, we were talking, we were talking about Nash Hutmacher and his weight, and I mentioned before the break that I don't think that 45 pounds is as big of a deal as some people are making it out to be, because if you follow UFC or boxing or any of these things, you see how dramatic those guys cut water weight right before a fight. For instance, a lot of the guys that fight around like 145, 150 will walk around. Their walk around weight is a good 15 pounds heavier than that number, but they have their methods with like dehydrating themselves and, the sauna suits. And I'm sure there's different methods now. Those are kind of the old school ways, but you basically just dehydrate yourself. You get down to that weight for however long, you rehydrate. So my guess is Nash Hutmacher, to get to that 285 number, is probably still walking around at 300 pounds. Now, that's still a big number to lose. That's still 30 pounds in less than 6 weeks, basically. So that's still a big number to lose. Now, was he actually walking, or was he actually playing at a full 330 by the end of the season? Maybe, I don't know. But what I said to you was, there's basic, in my mind, and we see this with guys when they retire. There's two kinds of offensive linemen. There's the guys that have to work really, really hard to keep the weight off. They're just naturally big guys, and football keeps them in shape. And then you have the guys that are naturally leaner and have to work really hard to put the weight on. I don't know which Nash is, but if he's the second, losing that weight would be pretty easy for him because it's unnatural.
But if he's the first,
it's a miracle. I assume he's not the first because it happened. Like, I don't know.
Like you're talking about, this is all speculation because who really knows?
Yeah, unless you're him.
Unless you're him.
Or when he retires, whether it's 2 years from now or 10 years from now in the NFL.
He opens up about it.
Well, and we'll just see him, right? Yeah. You see these linemen that retire, like Joe Thomas, is unrecognizable. One of the best offensive tackles of all time. Unrecognizable now because he's so lean. You see lots of these guys that either lean up or they get really big because they're not doing the activity to stay in shape all the time. Most people, like Ndamukong Suh's a weird outlier, I think. Although I think
where he just kind of sits at that weight.
He kind of just sits at like a lean 300, which is a weird thing to say, but he looks like he's in good shape. He doesn't like balloon up. Now I think he maybe thought he was going to play at some point this year too, so he was probably still kind of on the football like workouts and regimen there. But you watch these guys, just wait a couple years till after they retire. That's when you find out what kind of body type they actually have. And my guess is, based on the numbers that we've seen here, Nash has to work really hard to keep the weight on. So when you just stop working that hard, like the 30 pounds comes out pretty easy.
And it's not hard to fast. Like, yes, it is a little bit if you're so used to eating a full pizza or 12 eggs in one sitting and you have to cut everything in half. But in this case, he'll just probably sit hungry a little bit. and that's that, because you're right. It isn't too hard to hold off weight if you're not intaking as much food. Now, something that had me thinking though was there's no way he gets back up to 330 next season. If he's working out like this. I mean, maybe he does, but that would require a lot of weight to put back on.
I think wrestling ends in March. So you'd be talking about 5 months to get up to weight. Now, you're also doing that during summer conditioning, which is going to make it harder to put the weight on. So, yeah, he would have 5 months, but it would be super challenging to get back to 330.
And so I was sitting there and I'm thinking like, man, like, now you have to adjust your game a little bit. And yes, I realize what you pick up or what you lose in weight, you pick up in speed, but I don't know how well that actually works when you're facing off against, bigger guys. But then you brought up, well, actually most guys aren't 330 that play D tackle, especially at the next level. And I'm like, I guess I just sit here and assume all tackles and linemen are just huge.
And they're really not, especially now.
Defensive, right? Like, no. Like
offensive linemen are enormous.
Yeah, you get big guys. But defense, I looked up the top 4 defensive tackles during the break.
Mm-hmm.
Aaron Donald's number 1, and he's
284.
Yeah, well, that's just
he's an outlier because he's a freak.
That's just crazy.
Yeah.
But the next 3 weigh from 305 to 310.
Yeah.
The next 3, and that is
Hargrave.
Hargrave's 4, Quinnen Williams is 3, Chris Jones is 2.
Jones, yeah.
Those are the top 4. Like that is like the area that people just live in. And so like maybe you'll just start seeing the entire group pull a little bit of a Nash Hutmacher here and try to get down in weight versus staying a little bit blown.
And I mentioned this to you. I actually think I'm actually really excited of the possibility of seeing him play at like 305 or 310 because there were a bunch.
It'll be interesting to see how speedy he is.
Yeah, I feel like he is going to be super explosive. And there were a couple of those plays last year where he would make the initial play on the quarterback, but then couldn't close for the sack. And I wonder how many of those, if he's half a step quicker, if he's half a step more explosive, how many of those pressures turn into sacks? How many of those sacks turn into strip sacks? There's that next level of athleticism that I think he has.
But if he gets bullied,
what people will be really critical about what he did this offseason for sure. I don't think he will, because we're not talking about going from 300 to 250, right? Like if he was walking around at 305, lost the 45 pounds and was now down at 260, obviously that's not a weight class. I understand that, but we're just an example here. Like 260, I worry about him getting bullied. At 300, 305, like you said, that's a pretty standard weight, even for an NFL defensive tackle. I think with his athleticism at that weight, he would be a problem. But you're right.
And just watching him on the mat too on, was it Saturday?
Yeah.
Sunday?
Saturday.
Yeah. His footwork is just incredible. And now that is a huge reason due to his normal position on the football field. Like you have to have incredible footwork as a lineman in order to be successful, but just kind of watching his feet shuffle and never get crossed up and not lose a step in terms of his wrestling ability, but also like his work with his hands and how he kind of like stays within his opponent rather than trying to go too wide. He's staying in more of a like your shuck.
It's like a real efficient movement, like just close quarters.
And everything is so particular. Just seeing the transition from what he's learned over the years as a college football player to the college wrestling mat, not wrestling for however many years. That's just kudos to his training and his instincts. And so all of those things factor in too,
for sure.
And it's not just the weight thing, which is why, as I sit here and kind of like talk myself out of
you're
like
just processing
the weight. I don't want to call it an argument because I'm not really arguing that he should be more than he is, but just that conversation, that weight conversation, it makes a lot of sense. The direction he's going.
I think an explosive 305 Nash Hutmacher, that is a problematic polar bear for Big Ten offenses moving forward, I think. But like you said, if it doesn't go the way we want it to, people are definitely going to point to his offseason.
Everybody points to that. But look, Ty Robinson's 310.
Right, that's what I mean. And I think a little bit leaner Nash Hutmacher is going to be a wrecking ball. We are still going to effort DB. Still not sure where he's going there. But if not, we will continue. We got plenty to talk about here on a Monday on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Wrapping up hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. We are live on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. And we are brought to you by our friends at the NDOT Highway Safety Office. Remember, especially when you've got bad weather like this out, hands on the wheel, eyes and focus straight ahead. As the driver, you have one job, and that is to drive, especially when we've got some inclement weather like we've got heading our way over the next couple days. Make sure you are focused. This message from the NDOT Highway Safety Office.
I'm seeing some flakes, Ravi.
I know. We're getting to that 9 o'clock hour. I told Shane, I was like, man, once we're done with this show, we're unplugging. Everybody gets out of here trying to get on the road before there's too much snow out there. But it kind of reminds me, we were kind of texting about this yesterday, and as I'm going through my Twitter feed, I see, I follow some, because we cover high school sports. I follow some school administrators and school accounts and stuff like that. And I saw on one of the district's account, I don't remember which one. I'm not trying to avoid putting somebody on blast. I just don't remember. They said, okay, tomorrow, instead of saying, tomorrow's a snow day, right? Remember when you were a kid, you're watching TV, you're looking at the ticker.
Well, you had to wake up. Like, as a kid, we had to wake up in the morning and hope that school was canceled.
So we would love it when it was the best ever when they would cancel the night before, right? Which wasn't very often, especially then. They try and do it a little bit better now so you don't have to worry about scrambling in the morning. But, man, when you would get it the night before, it'd be iconic. But I remember listening on the radio when I was really young, when I was like first starting school. We turn the radio on, they go through the cancellations, and you're waiting in alphabetical order. And you're like, okay, come on. It's like, all right, Millard's coming.
You hate that your school starts with W.
You're like, Millard's coming up. They go Mead, and then they skip over Millard. You're like, oh, no. But here's my question. So I'm scrolling on Twitter yesterday. And I see
the biggest disappointment as a child.
Oh, yeah, when they skip over your letter. And you're like, maybe they just missed it.
I don't know if there is a more disappointing moment in my entire childhood than watching the ticker on Fox 2 News, or as Chris Renier in St. Louis says, Fox 2 News. Seeing the grade school I went to was Holy Infant, and you get like all of like the public schools in my area, because I went to a Catholic, like a small Catholic school. I lived in the Parkway School District, and Rockwood was the school district next to ours. You see Parkway come across, because like when you join the ticker,
like
sometimes you're not always at the beginning.
You're just random.
So like we join halfway through, and then you see Parkway's off, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's our area.
Yeah, that's where we live.
That's in our neck of the woods. And then you see Rockwood cancel too.
Like, that's the next
and you're
one.
like, oh my gosh, so it's guaranteed. And then you're watching it all the way to make sure that yours is canceled. Dude, Holy Infant never canceled. I was so mad. Never. It took, gosh, I think it took parents complaining at one point.
Really?
Because there were no school buses, and that's why public school
closes.
Would get, closed more times than private, is because, you have parents that are dropping, their kids off. But if weather's bad and buses are not going, why would they still want parents dropping their kids off at school? So that's why I think we ended up getting more snow days. I could have made that up too, but that's how I remember my childhood.
Here locally, it was always you're waiting for OPS to cancel, because OPS was the biggest district. If OPS canceled, everybody else would cancel, right? And so everybody was rooting for OPS to cancel and just like looking for the tickle. You were looking
it's like week 18 of the NFL when you need another team to win, so you're in the playoffs.
Exactly.
So you're rooting for like the Titans yesterday against the Jags.
You're like, okay, we need this to happen and get this, and so you're locked in. You're looking at OPS. But I'm scrolling through Twitter yesterday, and I saw, instead of a school cancellation, which a lot of them go out on Twitter now, they still do the ticker, but either there's like a hotline I think you can call now. There's the Twitter feeds where they announce it out there. But instead of saying, hey, it's a snow day, I saw tomorrow is a virtual learning day. And I thought to myself, did COVID cancel the snow day? Because they got so used to the distance learning and the virtual learning days. I think I think COVID may have put an end to the snow day in public schools. And I got to say, I'm a little heartbroken for the children out there. You don't hear that from me often, because as you know, I feel that kids are a tough hang. But my heart goes out to the little kiddos that are, in their little virtual learning session, instead of out there on the hills with their sleds and their, sometimes we'd get a little creative with our sledding apparatus. We used to use like pool inner tubes. Those things would fly because they're so light. They'd pop a lot, which is not great, but the flew.
The best ones are like lake tubes.
Yes,
like
they're a little thicker.
Yeah, the tubing for I guess
for tubing.
Tubing on the lake.
The tubing for tubing.
Right. Is that what those are called? Just tubes?
Yeah, I think they're inner tubes is what they're called.
Right. So the tubes for tubing.
Yeah, because it's where they get it from. It's the inter tube of a tire.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's that structure.
And when you add that weight, oh man, because for me, we were talking a little bit about weight in the last segment, and I weigh 170. Mm-hmm. And then we kind of joked during the break of like, how long would it take you to put on 20 pounds?
Yeah.
And how much commitment? I'm like, it'd probably take at least
it would take you a long time.
At least half a year. Yeah. It wouldn't take 33 days. I'll tell you that much. And I'm sure it doesn't take Nash 33 days to put weight back on.
We hope not. If we try,
maybe
we'll see.
Who knows? But as for like going back to the point about, tubing, it's so much better to have that extra weight, because then you get that.
You gotta get the speed going. Yeah,
and like that's what you're looking for when you're a kid.
Yeah, it was. So I do. I feel for. And hopefully, I don't know how it works because I don't have kids. Obviously, they didn't do virtual learning when I was in school. So hopefully it's just, like, hey, we got to get a few things done, and then you can go out the rest of the day to yourself. That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah.
But because, listen, just do it right now. Get the virtual learning in right now so that, because it hasn't started snowing yet. By noon, when it is sleddable outside, let my people go.
My other point to this too, and I've heard this, with adults, when you work from home, you're just not as productive.
Yeah,
because there's so many distractions. And as a kid, it's even worse.
Sure.
Because you have all of your at-home distractions, whether they're video games, whether it's the TV, whether it's just your environment, you see your toys, regardless of what it is. Kids get distracted no matter what. So that's why when you're in school, you're like, oh, I see lockers to my right and I'm in a desk, right? That's it. But when you're at home, it's like, I think I'm going to go walk around the house for a hot sec, or I'm going to go down to the basement. They're just not going to be as productive.
You know what's funny is I'm actually more productive when I work from home, which I do exclusively.
You would be one of the rare ones
because I'm comfortable. I work better when I'm comfortable. I'm more comfortable at my house than I am at an office. And a lot of it is I get to hang out with my dogs. Like, my dogs just hang out around my feet. They sleep. I reach down, pet them, give them a little love. But I'm most productive when I'm in a comfort zone.
Yeah, see, the only reason I am able to work from home is because my creative mind is able to work at home.
Yeah.
When I make my social media videos for our online platforms, that would be me just sitting on the couch scrolling on TikTok or Twitter or Facebook Reels, whatever. And I'm like, okay, this is that's my comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
But if I didn't work a creative job, if I was let's just say a marketing director for, the city, the city of Omaha, I would struggle sitting at home, even though it's in the creative field.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still doing too much busy work to make me get distracted.
Yeah,
want me to get distracted.
I think it really just depends on kind of how people's brains work, right? Mine, for whatever reason, I'm way more productive when I'm in a place where I feel good and happy and comfortable. And I'm sort of a homebody that way. I like to go out, but my place that I feel the best is at home. And so I feel like I'm more productive. But to get back around to it, let's cancel the virtual learning days, guys. Okay. We don't need that. We don't need that at all. Just go
take a break.
Let the kids take a little break. And more importantly, let the teachers take a break. Okay. Because the virtual learning, as you said, kids are distracted all the time. Okay. Hard enough to get herding those cats into a classroom, right? Much less trying to get them to pay attention in front of a computer at home. So just be like, okay, we're not going to learn that much today anyway. Let's not make it a big deal. Send out an email or something. Be like, hey, read this, whatever. Be ready to go tomorrow. But let the teachers chill for a day. All right. That's what I'm really about.
And how chill is a teacher's day anyway on a day off? Because they're probably just grading. They're catching up on grading.
But
tests
you don't have
papers,
to deal with.
But then you don't have to create a lesson plan.
You don't have to create a lesson plan. You don't have to be like, hey, little Jimmy, could you pay attention on your Zoom call here? Or, hey, could you mute your mic? Your little brother's in the background crying, or I can hear your dad on a sales call. Could you mute yourself? It's too much to deal with. We don't have to do that anymore. Let's get rid of the virtual learning on one-offs like this, right? I understand their purpose with.
Yeah. Well, if you have let's just say you live in North Dakota, right?
Yeah.
Where they get a ton of snow at various points. If you had 3 or 4 days of snow days in a row, then mix it in on okay, day 3, day 1, you have it off.
Yeah.
Day 2, it's okay, check in with your teacher to see if there's any
send a couple emails.
Yeah, assignments or something that
reading that you need to do. Yeah.
And then day 3, it's okay, we're actually going to have class now at home.
Day 3, day 4.
But day 1, just
let them have one day.
Let them go.
Let the teachers have a day. Let the students have a day. And, let them go sledding. That was the best part of a snow day, was going sledding. That was the best part. The best part of our show coming up next still. We have the last hour. We're going to get deep into the National College Football Championship tonight. We're going to get some previews with Matt Hladik. We're also going to do some prop challenge with our friends from Warhorse. All that coming up in the final hour here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. Hurrdat Sports Radio.
What is this?
We will be
back. Hard as you can, as fast as you can, as long as you can. You don't.
Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Something is just, you do you. Play as hard as you can, as fast as you can, as long as you can. You don't worry. You want to get better at something, you work a little harder at it. Whatever you do, don't get a big head. That's a trap. That's a deep, dark, lonely trap. But doing you is somebody that really wants to get good at football. You're passionate about it. You love it. You're a part of a team. We like to think of that as a Michigan man. Yeah, have at it.
Kicking off hour number 3 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me. We're on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and KFOR in Lincoln for hour number 3. We are brought to you by our friends at Dyer Law. If you've been hurt in a personal injury accident, hopefully that doesn't happen to you today, but the roads might be a little dicey. If something happens, you can count on the Dyer Law team to provide you with a helping hand when you need it. No matter what you're dealing with, call the Dyer Law team at 402-393-7529 or visit dyer.law to chat with trusted professionals about your personal injury claim. That's DYER.law. Joining us now on the Warhorse Sportsbook Hotline is Matt Hladik from thespun.com. Matt, how are you this morning?
Hey, I'm doing great, fellas. Always a pleasure to be on when you're talking some ball.
Absolutely. We appreciate you joining us here on the day of the national championship game, Michigan and Washington. Matt, let me just start with this. If I had told you this was the matchup at the beginning of the season, what would your response to me have been?
Well, I wouldn't have been surprised with Michigan because I thought that Michigan was, was coming into the season, was going to be in the playoff again. And I thought that this might have been like their year to really capitalize, because it would have been tough for Georgia to three-peat. Alabama seemed to be a little bit down because of the quarterback situation coming into the year. And looking elsewhere around the country, Texas was unproven, and, the Pac-12, there wasn't a clear consensus favorite coming out of there. So Michigan wouldn't surprise me. Washington, maybe a little bit, because I have to admit, going into the year, I was a little I thought Washington was a top 10 team, probably. I thought they were very good. But I thought I was a little higher on USC and Oregon in the Pac-12. I thought that, with Caleb Williams and the season that USC was coming off of, and then I thought Oregon was a little bit further along, even though Washington had a great season in 2022 as well. So I would not have expected them to be here on this Monday night, I have to admit.
Hey, Matt, as I sit here and assess both teams, Michigan has the defense, the elite defense. And then you look at Washington and they have the high-powered offense. With everything you know about both teams and what they can offer, which side of the coin would you rather have in this matchup?
I tell you what, I think, and this is the reason why I give them the advantage to win this game tonight. I would take Michigan because of the physicality up front on both sides of the ball and the ability to run, and I think keep that explosive Washington offense off the field. This is the best and most explosive passing game Michigan has faced all season. Marvin Harrison Jr. is as good, if not better, than Rome Odunze and Jalen Polk, obviously. But Colin Cord was not throwing the ball and having a season the way Michael Penix Jr. is. So this is the most explosive downfield passing game that Michigan will have faced. But I would take Michigan because I think games are more than likely won up front, and I think they'll be able to control the clock enough offensively where they're not overly reliant on throwing the ball and having J.J. McCarthy make a ton of plays. And they'll also be able to get some pressure on Michael Penix Jr., whose pocket movement, pocket presence is very good, but he's not the most mobile guy. So I think that's how they'll be able to slow Washington down just enough to win.
Matt, how much do you consider, because, I think a lot of people are thinking the same way you are with the physicality of Michigan, especially up front on that defensive line. But every time we've kind of had that narrative about Washington, whether it be against Oregon, either time, whether it be against Texas and their really highly touted defensive line as well, Washington has answered the bell with their offensive line that was named the best in the country this year. At what point do you just kind of have to throw your hands up and be like, maybe Michigan is as physical, it just doesn't look the way that we think it does?
Yeah, I will say this. Washington has handled every single challenge that's been thrown at them, even when the experts in Vegas haven't really thought they'd be capable. Keep in mind, this team, after beating Oregon in the regular season, was still a sizable underdog to them in the Pac-12 title game. And they handled that game. Texas was favored against them in the Sugar Bowl. So this is not something that they are not used to and functioning again. And if I'm, listen, you might have hinted at what, Kalen DeBear's message is to his team. He might be saying to them, hey, listen, this is just another game where we're being doubted. We are being looked at as a team that is lacking up front. We're looking at it as a team that, doesn't have the ingredients to beat the favorite. And, that could work for Washington. I mean, it's worked for them thus far, and that's why you can't discount them tonight.
As I kind of like have watched both of these teams play all season, Matt, you had said it right at the very beginning that Michigan was kind of like that team that everybody knew about, or at least could consider to be a national title contender. And then you had Washington kind of off the beaten path. But is it as simple as I was looking at the top 100 players in college football? So here's where my question's going. You look at what Washington has, okay, and they have Penix, Odunze, and Johnson. Penix is number 2. Odunze is number 7 in college football. But when you look at Michigan, they kind of have guys like all over the place in the top 100. They have a linebacker, they have a tackle, they have an offensive lineman, they have, of course, the quarterback, they have Blake Corum. And when you look at Washington, like, did you ever envision them doing it again with this same group? Because like that's kind of how I thought, like maybe they were just like it just kind of happened, right? Because when you get that a lot with teams that aren't often in this position, you're like, oh, well, maybe this is like that one-off year where they do it. Were you surprised they actually did it twice and were able to come back and get this far?
A little bit. And I think that might be, goes back to what you first asked me about if I expect them to be here at this point in the year. I thought they would be good again. Don't get me wrong, but it is tough. I mean, when you look at what they've done, they went 11-2 last year with a bowl win over Texas, and now they're 14. 25-2 in a 2-year span is really, really hard to do in college football, and that staying power is impressive, especially when you consider that they have been tested this year by going and the past 2 years really, because the Pac-12 has been underrated. I think the past 2 years when you look at some of the teams it's churned out. To me, I think what makes them a little bit of an outlier, besides coaching and besides things like and maybe some guys being underrated that they were able to capitalize on throughout the roster, I think that they have, with Michael Penix Jr., a guy who has a veteran in every sense of the word, quarterback who's been around college football forever. This take, I think there was another, I'm not the first person to say this. I think that Bud Elliott from 247 and CBS might have said this, that there's room for a team to kind of overcome that so-called blue chip ratio or lack of elite roster talent over with a transfer quarterback with experience at this time, considering all the guys with COVID extra years. And I think that's what happened with Michael Penix Jr. He's a guy who had played a lot of football in Indiana, and now he's in his 6th year of college, and he's playing out of his mind. And I think that is what has enabled Washington to have that staying power when maybe they weren't expected to, because they've had a quarterback who is, 23 years old, going to be 24 later this year with all that experience. And he's been able to capitalize on that. Obviously they have pieces around them, the receivers, they have a really good offensive line, but I think that having that talent at the most elite, the most important position in football has enabled them to overachieve, so to speak.
We're talking with Matt Hladik of thespun.com. Matt, you mentioned the coaching a little bit earlier in this matchup. Obviously, Jim Harbaugh, one of the best coaches in the college game, constantly mentioned for NFL jobs. We'll see what his future holds after tonight. But then on the other side, you've got Kalen DeBoer, who has done absolutely nothing but win every place he has been. And so that leads me to the question, who do you think has the coaching advantage tonight?
I know it sounds kind of cliche, but I don't really know. And I think I said DeBear. I meant to say DeBoer. I'm sorry before, but I think they both are really good at what they do, and they really have established an identity for their team. Washington, they're good up front. They have an explosive offense, and it's not just Kalen DeBoer, but Ryan Grubb also as the offensive coordinator has done a tremendous job. Jim Harbaugh has been able to make tweaks and changes to his philosophies over the years at Michigan that I think have enabled them to go from kind of being that team that people think underachieves or did underachieve to really being elite. But, you know, when you look at what they have, he's always going to be physical up front. They're always going to have a strong run game. Defense is always going to be a priority, whether it was with Mike McDonald or now it's with, Jesse Minter. I think Sherrone Moore's done a great job as a coordinator this year, not just when he had to fill in as the head coach, but also with play calling. I think that it showed in the Rose Bowl. I don't know if there is a coaching advantage in terms of, well, one guy's really that much better X and O's or one guy's really built his program that much more than the other. I think it's kind of just a little bit about both guys are really good at what they've done and have built the programs and the image they want. And now it's about who is able to do more on one night on the biggest stage.
Matt, you mentioned some of the key assistants, the coordinators, Minter and Moore for Michigan. If Jim Harbaugh were to move on, do you think they'd look internally to just kind of keep the train rolling, sort of the way Notre Dame did with Marcus Freeman? Or do you think they'd look outside and try and bring in a big fish nationally?
It's such an interesting question because historically Michigan has been about the Michigan man, and they've tried to fill either from within, with guys like Lloyd Carr, or they've tried to fill with guys who had ties to Michigan, whether it was, Brady Hoke or obviously Jim Harbaugh was the big fish that they tried to land and did land in 2015. It's tough because I think Sherrone Moore and Jesse Minter have earned themselves head coaching consideration, but you're looking at a program that's coming off 3 straight Big Ten titles, 3 straight college football playoff appearances, at the very least a national title game appearance, and possibly a national championship if they win tonight. That's high expectations. And if Harbaugh does leave, Michigan fans will be disappointed, but he's already a legend in their eyes. He's, restored the program. He's won the first national title in a little more than a quarter century. And he'll be good in Ann Arbor forever. But how do you keep that going? Because they're going to want to keep that going. They're going to want to keep up this recent domination of Ohio State. They're going to want to keep up the ability to compete nationally. Obviously, you're not going to win the Big Ten every year. You're not going to win national championships or be in the college football playoff every year. But you want to be able to do it consistently. You don't want to go into the doldrums that they kind of went into under Rich Rodriguez and under Hoke before Jim Harbaugh came. So that's where I think it really becomes a fascinating choice. I could see them promoting internally, and I think, like I said, both those guys have earned the right to get head coaching consideration somewhere this offseason. But I also think there's going to be the temptation to go out and get a bigger name, whoever that might be, to kind of keep up with the brand and keep up with the trajectory that the program has reestablished.
Matt, same question, other side of the sideline, or at least a follow-up to your response there. How does Washington keep it going without Michael Penix and Rome Odunze next season?
It's going to be a huge test. It's going to be a very big test, especially if, we talked about, I mentioned Ryan Grubb in my last answer. He's somebody who gets some looks to run his own program now. He's been an assistant at the college level for almost 20 years in different for different programs and in different roles. And now, he's starting to get some accolades and some recognition. So if they lose him too, and this is just clearly hypothetical, I'm not saying, he's a candidate anywhere yet. they would also be replacing an OC. They're going into a new conference. They're going to be playing Michigan in the regular season next year. So it's going to be an adjustment period for them. I think that it might be a little tougher for them to kind of keep this rolling without a reload year or a rebuild year. Maybe not in 2024, but at some point, it seems likely. But again, this is, they won't have Penix, but this is what I said about a program that has found its identity, found what it wants to be under, Kalen DeBoer, who's done nothing but win no matter where he's at. So I think he'll be able to keep Washington among one of the better programs in the country. It wouldn't surprise me if they do take a step back at some point, even for just a year, to kind of rebuild things.
We're talking with Matt Hladik from thespun.com. I do want to say on DeBoer here for a second, Matt. I asked Andrew this question last week, and I know I'm putting you on the spot here a little bit, but as you look at what DeBoer's done at Washington, how many coaches in the country would you actually take over him? If you're an AD, you've got an open job, you can basically hire whoever you want. How many guys are on the list before him? Because I feel like the more I watch him, the shorter and shorter that list gets.
Great question. Looking around, obviously, I would take Harbaugh over him.
Okay.
Just because of the track record of success. Even though maybe that seems a little bit of the opposite of what I said, and neither team has a coaching advantage. But I think that starting a program or hiring a coach for a program, I would take Harbaugh. I would take, obviously, Nick Saban for everything he's accomplished. Mm-hmm. And then it becomes a little bit after that, it really becomes, there's some arguments to be made on both sides. Now, I will say this. Kalen DeBoer has mostly coached he's coached a lot on the West Coast and the Midwest. So you wonder, okay, would you hire him in the SEC?
Sure.
How would he work there? So there's definitely those
like
type
a regional,
of fits.
yeah.
Right. But you look at some of the other programs that, have been elite, and, he's beaten Steve Sarkisian this year. Mike Norvell obviously had an outstanding season with Florida State, mm-hmm. but, Kalen DeBoer's put together back-to-back years. Mm-hmm. Forgetting Kirby Smart on how I did that, but Kirby Smart I would take over.
Sure, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
But the next level of guys like Lanning, Norvell, Sarkisian, like I think it's a genuine. After
it is,
you get past
you
get past Saban and Smart, it's a conversation.
Right, and then you have guys, like Lane Kiffin, who have been successful in the SEC and have that regional thing down. Mm-hmm. And then you get down into, your Lincoln Rileys, your Brian Kellys, your Brent Venables, and Ryan Day, guys like that. So we've seen a lot of cases, college football, outside of a few guys, it does kind of rely a lot on circumstance and location and culture and things like that. But he's certainly put himself among the elite of the elite in the country with what he's done the last couple of years.
Matt, I kind of want to change gears here and talk a little college basketball. And I want to hit home with you first, because in about 10 days, our Nebraska Cornhuskers will be finding their way into your homeland. They'll be taking on Rutgers in Piscataway. And, we say it all the time, but you got to live it. Piscataway is such a hard place to play. Like, it's for any team to go in there and play basketball. It is a ridiculously difficult place to play. Why is that?
And it's funny because when I graduated from Rutgers in 2009, and for the last couple of years when I was in college, and then for several years after that, it wasn't always a tough place to play. The program was down. They would pull an upset occasionally, yes, but the home court advantage that you saw a little bit under Gary Waters in the early 2000s and Kevin Bannon in the late 90s, and now you see with Steve Peichel the last several years, it wasn't there. Now, with that being said, the rack started to lose a little bit of its luster last year. When you look at what happened last season when Rutgers struggled in the last month, Nebraska beat them in Piscataway.
Mm-hmm.
Michigan beat them in Piscataway. Northwestern completely outplayed them and beat them in Piscataway. They've lost several games like that at home. So, listen, this year they have not played well at all. It's a down year, and I know they have the hype from the recruiting class coming in next year, but it hasn't been a strong year for them, and they were handled by Illinois in their biggest home game of the year so far. Nebraska obviously has been a little bit of the talk of the conference. This year they've been, they're 2-2 in league play, but 12-3 overall, trying to push for a tournament berth. And I think that they have obviously the blowout win over Indiana was nice. They'll get tested at home tomorrow night against Purdue, number 1 team in the country. Then they go to Iowa, tough place to play. So you'll learn a lot about Nebraska this next week or two. But I think that Nebraska has the better team this year. What will be tough to play there is if Rutgers catches a game where it shoots well, like it did against Seton Hall. It's one of the worst shooting teams in the country, but sometimes you get a night at home where things are clicking and you're making baskets. Then it can become a tougher place to play because really from just a sheer acoustic standpoint, what makes it so hard is that it's small. The fans are right on top of you. The roof takes in all the sound and keeps it in, traps it. So you feel like you're playing just in a maelstrom.
That is Matt Hladik from thespun.com. Matt, we appreciate your time and hope you enjoy the national championship game tonight.
You too, guys. I think it's going to be a fun one. I think unlike last year where we got, domination, I think this is going to be a back and forth affair that is decided in the fourth quarter.
You want to give us a score prediction?
Definitely.
You want to throw one out there?
I will go. I'm going with Michigan 28, Washington 24.
There we go. That's Matt Hladik from thespun.com. He's got Michigan with the win, but not the cover. Very important there.
Because good teams win and great teams cover.
Great teams cover. Yes, they do.
Matt, we appreciate your time. We'll catch up again soon.
Anytime, fellas.
Thanks, man.
That's Matt Hladik from thespun.com. We're going to give our picks and previews coming up next here. Really interesting stuff there from Matt on the national championship game. I'm fascinated. I know we asked a lot of questions about the coaches and the coaching matchups, but that to me is one of the more fascinating storylines here. The rising star of Kalen DeBoer, the established guy of Jim Harbaugh, who may be coaching his last game at Michigan tonight. I don't think that's out of the question. In fact, maybe that's the betting favorite at this point. I don't know. We'll talk more about that next here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio here on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and KFOR in Lincoln. We're live from the Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill at the H&H Chevrolet stage. I'm Ravi Lulla. That's Andrew Rogers. And we are brought to you by our friends at Dingman's Collision Center. Andrew's going to be paying them a visit today to get his car looked at. They have been family-owned and operated in Omaha for over 25 years. First place Best of Omaha for 18 years running. They've got 4 great locations throughout the metro. They have the latest technology, so they can work on Andrew's car. They can work on my car. They can work on your car, too. Whatever you've got, they can handle it. And they always give back to the community. With every car repaired, they give back. Go check out dingmans.com for more information about their services as well as their give back program. Before we get into our national championship preview, I want to say congratulations to former Nebraska coach Frank Solich, officially a college football Hall of Famer.
Yeah, that's so great. I mean, he had such a good run at Nebraska. He had a great run at Ohio after Nebraska, where he coached for 15, 16 years.
Yeah.
He led the Huskers to a BCS championship game in 2001. I mean, he's won so many awards. Like, I mean, just throughout his career. I mean, and rightfully so. I mean, he's Big 12 Coach of the Year twice. 12 consecutive non-losing seasons at Ohio, 11 bowl games, 4 MAC titles. I mean, this guy just wins, and he always has won. Unfortunately, it didn't end the way fans, I think, wanted early on at Nebraska, but when that relationship was mended this past season, it was great to see Frank Solich back at Memorial Stadium. I have a question for you, though, and maybe this is just an outsider trying to – or maybe it's an outsider listening to people that like don't actually know what they're talking about. But was the rumor that Solich had some woo-woo member of their family like put a spell on Memorial Stadium, and that's why football went downhill? Was that like a weird like rumor going around?
It's something that I've heard of in the last couple of years. It's not something anybody talked about until recently.
Okay.
So yeah, that has been out there in the last couple of years, especially, but not. It wasn't a thing at the time. It hasn't been a thing until literally the last year or so.
So it was just somebody trying to get famous when social media became big.
Yeah, probably. I mean, it was kind of this.
But if it actually happened and it has worked over these last 20 years, that'd be insane.
It would be insane.
Although they did win and were ranked under Bo Pelini, so how much of that is actually true?
I mean, they had until the Scott Frost era, they did have differing levels of success. It wasn't the 90s level of success, but
what if she was like on the walls of the stadium, like, halfway through this spell, like just give them like a little bit of taste, like make them like feel really good about themselves, and then just take it away again.
Yeah, I think that's a recent addition to the lore around Frank.
But good
Solich.
On Frank Solich. It's well deserved.
And I'm not sure people appreciate how desolate of a program Ohio was when he took over. They had a little bit of a good stretch under Jim Grobe in the late 90s, but Ohio hadn't made a bowl game before Frank Solich since 1968. They'd only made 2 in their history, and then Frank Solich makes his first one at Ohio in 2006, and then continued to make 10 more after that. So out of the total of, 11, 13, 15, out of the 15 bowl games Ohio has ever played in, 11 of them are Frank Solich.
Without looking at his total win numbers here, he is the winningest coach in MAC history. How many wins does he have? I'll give you a window of 7.
Okay, so he was there from 2005
to 2020.
To 2020. So that's 15 years at an average of, call it 8 a year. That puts me at 120. Let's call it 119.
I was going to say 156.
Whoa, 156 would be wild.
That's aggressive.
But is that all time though?
No, that's just at Ohio. Just at Ohio.
Yeah. 115.
Oh, that's pretty good.
I almost gave you 5. I gotta be. I'm too nice with you.
I'd have gotten in there at 5
I gotta
too.
say, I know, but I gotta just go with that, like, because I'm going to say 5, and then I'm like, well, like I'll give him 7, a little extra buffer room. But because you're too close now, I'm gonna have to say I'll give you within 2.
You're gonna have to start tightening up the reins on me a little bit here. But yeah, congratulations to Frank Solich, part of that College Football Hall of Fame class. Well deserved. And I'm glad that people have. Because it got a little, it wasn't great around here when it ended for Frank Solich, both from the athletic director standpoint, some of the fan base as well. I'm glad that relationship has been repaired and that people appreciate the job that Frank Solich did here, not only as head coach, but I mean, the man devoted almost 50 years of his life to Nebraska football, or 40 years. I think it was about 40 years of his life to Nebraska football. You have to appreciate that. It is impossible to write the history of Nebraska football without Frank Solich in it. So congratulations to Coach Solich there. Wanted to get a little bit of a preview. We've got I want to do some props later with you in our last segment. But
because the festival of games is going on with Warhorse right now, which
yes.
I got my picks validated.
You did.
I went up there because I had to kind of get the lay of the land so I could share that once the big game rolls around in February.
So we'll get to that at 9:45, but let's do our picks here for just winners, and then we will get to our prop challenge for the Festival of Games in the next segment. But Washington and Michigan. You probably got a little bit of a feel for where I'm leaning in our interview with Matt Hladik, but I'm tired of people doubting this team. I mean, we did it against Oregon. We did it against Texas. We're doing it again now against Michigan. This team has answered the bell every single time. They're now 5.5-point dogs, started at 4.5. Obviously, money's been pouring in on Michigan. That's why that number's moving to 5.5. This is a Washington team that has answered every single call. And I disagree with Matt. I'm taking Kalen DeBoer in a coaching advantage over Jim Harbaugh at this point. Maybe I'm sipping too much Kool-Aid. I love that guy. I'm obsessed with Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb's offense. And here's the thing that I want to focus on, and then I'll let you get your opinions in as well. Everybody's talking about how physical this Michigan defensive line is. It was the same narrative with Texas. How many sacks did Texas have against Michael Penix? That'd be a goose egg. No sacks against Michael Penix. He is not only good in his pocket presence, that might be his best feature, and that's saying something because we talked earlier this week about how ridiculously lightning fast that ball comes out of his hand and how accurate he is. His pocket presence might be his best feature. Between that and the best O-line in the country, nominated and awarded the best O-line in the country, I don't think Michigan's going to be able to slow down this offense enough to stop them and to win this game. On the other side, we've seen Washington's defense answer the bell enough against offenses that are a little bit better than Michigan's, to be honest. Texas's offense is better than Michigan's. I think Oregon's offense is better than Michigan's. They answer the bell against those two teams. I think they do it again against Michigan. I'm taking Washington on the money line, straight up, winning this ball game.
I want Washington to win so bad.
I
really do.
And I don't know how much of it for me is like just wishful thinking, but I genuinely think they win this game.
And I really want them to win because of all the drama that took place with Michigan this season and all the cheating that kind of took place. I don't love how they made their way here. I thought they could have done it without going through
they probably could have
every twist and turn they went through this season.
Yeah.
I just really want to see Washington do it. A couple of reasons why. One, Washington last was here, in like 91, 92, when they had like a shared title with Miami.
So they won it in 91. They were in the playoff in 2016, but obviously didn't make the title game.
Right.
Yes. But they had a shared title in 91 with Miami.
So Miami, I always fall back on this. When I don't have a rooting interest in the game, I want the team that hasn't been there too often to win it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the team I'm going to root for. Michigan obviously has that shared title with Nebraska in 97. Plus, they've been competitive.
Yeah.
Washington has not been competitive.
Washington has an 0-12 in there.
Right. So that's why I want them to win so badly, because I think it's just their time. I love what Michael Penix has done all season.
Mm-hmm.
I love how humble he's been throughout the entire season. Whenever his name was just getting overlooked in the Heisman talks and the Heisman conversation, and dude, they answer the bell. They answer it in Washington. The one thing I'll disagree with you on is this game. I don't think they're actually being overlooked. On paper, I would say Michigan is the better team, but I still want Washington to win the game, and that's why I'm taking Washington tonight.
All right, we both pick Washington. I'm going to give you a score, too. 35-31, Washington beats Michigan. That's my final score prediction.
Hold on, let me look at my Festival of Game props. How much did I have Michigan losing by? We'll go over that next. We've got some props brought to you by our friends at Warhorse Sportsbook. We'll tell you all about their Festival of Games challenge, because it's too late to get in for the national championship game. It is not too late to get in for the Pro Football Championship. We'll talk about that next, as well as go over our prop picks for the national championship here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio here on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and KFOR in Lincoln. As we wrap up the show here, we are brought to you by our friends at Warhorse Sportsbook and Casino. It is time to get yourself entries into the Warhorse Festival of Games for the Pro Football Championship, that big game in February. You all know what I'm talking about, to crown the champion of professional football. Here's how it works. You go to the Warhorse Casino in Lincoln. That is the only place you can get your entries at this point. If you're a rewards member, you already have free entry into the Festival of Games promotion. You can also get qualified by every $50 or more ticket that you bet on at the sportsbook in Lincoln qualifies you for an additional entry. Or if you get 50 points worth of slot or gameplay in, you also get an entry a day for that as well. And here's why you want those entries, because they get you a prop card. You know what props are for the Super Bowl? There's all these little side bets. Okay, is it going to be heads or tails on the coin flip? Who's going to score first? How long is the national anthem going to go? All of these types of props. You're going to get a chance to pick those. And if you get all of them right, you will have your chance at $100,000. Even if you don't get them all right, though, you're going to be in a drawing for $20,000 cash or free slot play. It is a great opportunity to win some big cash and prizes from our friends at the Warhorse Sportsbook. Make sure you go to warhorsecasino.com for more details.
Now, real fast, I went to Warhorse this weekend, and I'm going to tell you how it works. Here's your book for dummies. I went through the process so you don't have to. When you walk into the door, you have to do this in Lincoln.
Yep, the Lincoln Casino.
When you walk through the doors, all you have to do is either tell security right at the door, the people taking your ID, or find somebody on the floor that's walking around that you want to sign up to be a member, a Warhorse promotional rewards member. And you have to do that.
You have to be a rewards
the only way you can activate your account. So if you're not one already, you have to do that. You can build your prop list online, and that's fine. Once those odds come out for the Super Bowl, like, you can do that. But what you have to literally do is walk in, find somebody, get a card, get your account activated. Then there's kiosks off to the left side when you get into the big slot area of the casino. And you'll know where you're going because you're heading the direction of, like, the racing lounge, the racing lounge. And there's a big sign that has promotion. There's a Festival of Games sign. Like, you'll see it. All you do then, once you have your card, you swipe it in the promotional machine or the promotion kiosk. You hit Festival of Games, and then you hit validate. That's it.
That's all you got to do.
And then you're validated for your entry. And then on top of what Ravi was saying with the, hey,
how
you
to
spend
get the
$50
entries,
and you get more entries, like, you still have to validate them every single time, though. So it's a key thing to remember, because if you go 25 out of 25 on your props for the big game,
$100,000,
and you don't validate it, you don't get the prize.
Yep.
So you have to validate at the casino.
So that's the key there. Become a rewards member. Go to the casino. Get validated. They can definitely help you out. They will walk you through the process with all their helpful staff there. But they also did one of these for the national championship game. Now, it's too late to get in for that one. But I wanted to go over some of the props because, A, props are super fun, and B, it's a good way to talk about the national championship game tonight. So I know you've got them up on your computer. I know you made your picks.
I made all of them
yesterday, which was your last day to get in for the national championship. You've got until February 1st to get qualified for the professional championship. And after February 1st, it'll be the week before the Super Bowl is when you can make your picks. But let's go through some of these props. I know you picked out some favorites.
Yeah, so the coin toss is always a favorite because it's 50-50.
And takes no skill whatsoever.
No skill. I took Washington because they'll make the call.
Okay. So you say they win the coin toss?
So if they don't call heads, they're dead to me. Because that's what I have.
What about tails never fails?
Well, actually, the best part here is all you have to do is take who will win the opening coin toss.
Oh.
So technically,
it could be either.
Yeah, technically.
There you go.
You know, Washington could be good as long as they call it right. Now, Michigan may have been like the better way to go, because like then you just like leave it up to fate. But you know what? Washington's going to decide it for me right away. Well, so the coin toss is always a favorite of mine.
With all the cheating that Michigan's did, you got to figure karma in the coin toss.
But they probably know what it's going to be.
That's probably a Connor Stallions.
So if they could guess, then you know what? We'd give it to them.
Over.
But you know what? They can't guess.
Who's the home team?
I bet Connor Stallions
it'll be
coin
Michigan.
a little bit. Yeah, because they're the higher seed.
So they get to choose the
So Washington,
the away team gets to call it.
The away team.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yep. So that's the coin. So what about some ones about the actual game?
Yeah, so this one is like the hardest prop, I think.
Okay.
And it's number 6 on the prop list. Okay. How long will the first field goal made be? And the reason it's so hard is there's 5 options to choose from. Like other times around, it's like, okay, you have 2, you have 3. This one's like less than 25, 26 to 35, 36 to 45, etc. And I'm just like, this right here will be the question that gets most people.
Yeah.
Like if you had a card that was 24 out of 25, this is the question you probably missed.
So I've got an answer. I've got some reasons for it. And it probably doesn't matter or make any sense. But in my head, I'm like, yeah.
Leave it to me to pick the field goal, the kicking.
Of course, yeah.
The stat
the kicker guy over favorites. Here. So I think it's 36 to 45.
My man, that's what I chose.
Because here's what I feel like happens a lot in these national championship games. Somebody will break kind of a big play, a chunk play, get themselves into field goal range, and then the drive stalls a little bit. You maybe don't execute the way you want to. The nerves are going early in the national championship game. So you get yourself into field goal range, but you're not quite to the red zone. You're in kind of that medium distance field goal. I think like a 39-yard field goal. First one on the board. I feel good about that.
Now, one of the props on here, could really either go way left or way right.
Okay.
And that is, will there be a quarterback that throws for over 300 yards in this game?
See, I think that's I think it's one of the
easiest ones. If it goes way
ones.
right, it's obviously Michael Penix.
Yeah, I think that's one of the easiest ones.
And Washington wins this game. But if Penix gets shut down, J.J. McCarthy won't come close to 300.
No, I don't think so. Honestly, I think even if Washington loses, I think they could. I still think Penix ends up with 300 yards. Because if they lose, you figure they're probably behind. They're throwing more. I think Penix ends up with 300 yards pretty much no matter what. There's only, I think, there's 4 games all year out of 14. 10 of his 14 games, he cleared 300 yards. 2 of those, we're pretty sure he was playing with broken ribs. And one of them was a blowout early in the year as well. So I feel pretty good about that number of 300. I think Penix is going way over. He had 430 against Texas. Now, I know Michigan's going to want to control the ball a little bit more, but I don't think they're going to be able to stop him. I go way over. I like that one easy.
Really?
Yeah. To me, that was, we were talking about in the break, we were kind of talking about like no-brainers.
That was your no-brainer?
One of them is like, okay, longest touchdown, Washington.
Yeah, Washington,
easy,
for
right?
Sure.
Like,
if you had to predict, it would be Washington.
Huge chunk plays. I feel good about that one. One of my next ones was, Penix is definitely throwing for 300 yards.
Okay, now tell me this. Who scores the first touchdown in the game? It's not a prop, but the prop here is, will the jersey number of the player be odd or even?
Ooh.
So, like, who do you think scores the first touchdown? My guess was Rome.
So that's a 1, right? So that's
yes.
That's
so I went with odd.
I was kind of going Blake Corum. I think maybe Michigan drives early, and that gives me a even, right? Number 2.
That would give you an even.
So yeah, I think you take odds, I'll take evens.
I don't like that, Ravi, because this is for I'm trying to make money here. I'm not trying to have you beat me.
I'm just trying to.
This makes no sense.
What other ones do you like?
So, and then you asked me as a follow up coming out of the break.
Yeah.
Well, I guess going into the break, you said, what's my score prediction? And I said, I'll get to it on the prop list.
Yeah.
A prop number 14 on the Festival of Games list here is, will the margin of victory be 6 points or more? I said no. So I fall into the category similar to you. If Washington wins this game, it won't be by much.
Mm-hmm.
I actually think they'll win by 3 points. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to give the final score 38-35.
Ooh, okay. So we're in the same neighborhood.
I want it to be a high-scoring game, and the only way for a lot of these props to hit is it to be a high-scoring game, is for it to be a high-scoring game. So that's why I'm going that route. My question to you, though, will Michael Penix throw a pick?
Ooh.
Because he'll be throwing a lot in this game, and Michigan has a really nice defense. We saw J.J. McCarthy open the semifinal game with a pick, and then it got overturned.
Yeah, luckily for them.
But for the last prop on this list, it's which team will force the first turnover. I chose Michigan. I can just see a point in this game, maybe early on, where Penix is throwing a lot, and he throws a pick, and he just kind of comes off the field like a little bit like defeated, shakes his head a little, and then runs off to the sidelines, and then he just goes off after that. Do you think I'm like in the right neighborhood there, or does Michael Penix just stay perfect all night?
I think he could throw a pick. I wouldn't be shocked by that. I mean, he's thrown 9 this year, which is not a huge number, but he throws a lot of like one interception games. I think in 7, if I'm counting right, 7 of his 14 games, he's thrown exactly 1 interception. So that wouldn't shock me at all. If he has more than that, he's only got 1 multi-interception game all year. He had 2 against Arizona State. But I think 1 interception is on the table. I wouldn't be shocked by that at all. He threw 1 against Oregon. That would not be surprising to me. I think I agree with you that Michigan forces the first turnover. Although,
and remember, it could be on like a muffed punt.
Yeah, I will say Michigan did have the special teams troubles in the semifinal against Alabama, and we saw J.J. McCarthy last year with the interception problems.
Didn't Washington muff 1 too?
They muffed 1, but Michigan had 2, and then I think they had another issue as well.
Yeah, not great.
They were kind of shooting themselves in the foot a little bit. I think maybe the easiest one on here, tell me if I'm crazy as we close out here, which running back will have the most yards, Johnson or Corum? That's Corum all day, right?
Yeah. Well, and who knows if Dylan Johnson's even playing.
Yeah, and if he does, he's I don't think he's 100%. So that's your prop cards brought to you by our Warhorse
I'll keep you posted
Sportsbook
throughout the game.
Yeah, he'll let you know how he's doing. That is the show for today. We will be back tomorrow and recapping that national championship game here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.